That's basically how I felt. Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't care about spoilers, to be honest with you.
you do though. Don't lie.
Not for my hero. I mean, I'm probably not gonna watch it. Like, there's a couple seasons out that I haven't watched yet, and I don't plan on. So
You know, think of it this way, Eggs for Brecky, like New World Supernova, he's already in the rabbit hole. I'm kind of like just running.
And we're live. Come one, come all, nothing but love, nothing but respect. This is my random shit talking spiel, as always, before we start shit talking about One Piece. Or it devolves into talking about other anime. So, welcome! Welcome, everyone. Um, okay, so we're here for chapter 1069, wink wink, nudge nudge, for One Piece. Um,
Make sure you got that incognito tab, boys.
before we before we go into it, I've got to ask, do you guys think it's a good or a bad chapter? What's your thoughts for it?
yeah, it was good.
Good.
Yeah, nostalgia wants me to give it a 9 out of 10, but I don't know. Common reader makes me want to give it a 7.
I I definitely like a lot in this chapter. I actually give this chapter a lot of props. But what I will say is one thing that really fucking just like weirded me out was seeing the cover and seeing Lufeld instead of Dufeld. And then realizing that the English translation for Dufeld has been wrong since it first came out, and it's always been like romanized as Lufeld, and me just going, Viz, why did you do this to me?
Personally, I like the name Dufeld more.
Yeah, dude, I like I opened up this chapter and I saw it written, and it was like the Kobe to Kobe, like changing the C to the K, and I was just like, no, why? We have letters for a reason. Like the only thing that should be really hard to determine which letter's which is when you're changing an R to an L in Japanese to English. Apart from that, it's like you can't fuck up a name that bad, can you? But
I
apparently not.
mean, the
Well,
English language
my
is
name in
strange.
Chinese is Danny R, so
Now, fair.
names change.
Yeah, but see, that's the R and the L, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, think of it this way, guys. In the English language, you have the word know, like to know something. But if you were to take each individual letter and actually say it how it's written out, you'd say canal.
I don't know
Mm.
what you're talking about. Um, the Mads ship, and Mads being a philanthropic endeavor of Lone
So who's
King
this?
Dufeld.
Who is this guy? Because the one thing that I suck at with One Piece is I see like a character and I'm like, this guy's going to be that important, and I just don't even bother trying to remember them.
This was one
Like
of the
random like vice admirals, I just won't even try.
this was one of the underworld kings that was at Big Mum's at the whole cake wedding, right?
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
he got shot in the back by Stussy
Dulcie
after
and
he tried
killed.
to open up the Tamate Bako box or whatever, right?
Yeah, he got murked.
Okay.
So
Okay. He's the one that got. Yeah.
he's currently murked. But I mean, first things first. This is the weirdest looking ship. Like I don't know if that's a cannon or an observatory on the front. Like this thing does not look like it should float.
Yeah. I think it's just meant to be like weird and sciencey, basically. Is the
This
idea.
looks like something that you'd see in like 1960 Disney.
I also don't know how you can actively claim to be a pacifist ship and have Queen and Caesar on board, right? While also actively doing child testing. Like, dude, this is the biggest war crime under a white flag. Like, dead ass. Like, you gotta think, the result of this disbanding immediately starts with, like, the Vinsmokes essentially being born. Right? Timeline wise. Meaning it's like, they're prepping for child augmentation by, like, the time Mads breaks up. So they've been messing with kids for a minute.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Vega
Good thing this isn't the real world.
Vegapunk's all about the the progress for the world. You know, it's progress. I swear, it's progress. He's looking more and more sus as we go along. All right. So let's start from the top and work our way down. I find it cute that we get some more of the assistants, and specifically we get to see some of the small assistants. So we finally see that they don't look like the automaton from the NL flashback or the NL cover story. We also got to see some new science like advisors. So you got one for statistics and Macarigo. Someone mentioned in a comment what that was, but I cannot for the life of me remember off the top of my head. It was a very odd subject. We cut down to the Straw Hats seeing Rob Lucci, realizing that they're after Vegapunk, Luffy getting ready to go in, Lucci talking his mad shit, and then Kaku tries to draw Lucci back and is like, dude, we can't do this. They're a Yonko crew now. Like, what the fuck are you doing? We're starting two wars here. You know,
somebody's got to be a diplomat.
Which good on him, but it's like they were already prepping, and like later on in the chapter they address it more. They were already prepping to go to war with Vegapunk here, let alone go to war with Vegapunk allied with the Yonko crew, while allied with the Supernova. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like more and more shit is stacking up, but at the same point in time, on the flip side of it, I think the world government side is going to be a lot easy. Like, there's going to be a lot more people than we necessarily think, and I have to throw this out here now. I think, with the conflict that arises in this chapter between Luffy and Lucci, right? There's one thing really important that we've got to understand. Narratively speaking, if Luffy wins, the story continues status quo, right? If Lucci loses, however, he was already going to have been sacrificed pre-time skip for losing once against Luffy. Now, in fundamentally the most important mission of Cypher Pole to date, if he loses again, they will straight up kill him. Like, they will straight up just not worry about him and kill him. You know what I mean? Like, think about that.
I think you got to consider, though, that Luffy now has the rep of a Yonko. Before, he was like some trash pirate.
I mean, yes, but even still, it's like, look at Guernica. These guys are expected to run in there with the vest on and the trigger in hand, if you know what I mean. And I mean, like, Lucci does... Lucci does do good here, like, engaging. But, like, the fallout for... If Luffy loses, Power Scale is going to be like, oh, that makes no sense, blah, 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 blah. Right? And it would feel really odd for Luffy to lose here. Would it not?
It would.
But if Lucci loses, it almost creates a whole new rift in the world government. Whether or not any former CP9 would side with him is a question. Whether or not he would divulge any secrets and like have to try and bail, or whether or not he will just relentlessly follow the Straw Hats even after being potentially defeated. You know what I mean? There's a lot more riding on Lucci not losing for Lucci than there is for Luffy to win. If that makes sense.
For me, it's more so seeing this whole chapter, especially, or I guess this smaller arc. If CP0, well, we've already determined that CP0 is the main antagonist. So, to me, this is like Oda's ultimate test run to see how far he can go with revealing a character who hasn't been, quote unquote, I guess, combatively active since pre-time skip. So seeing all these jumps and the new form that Lucci's able to implement, it kind of tells me that with Luffy unlocking his own special, showing how much pun intended, how much Oda can stretch using you old villains. I guess that's kind of just how I feel about it.
See, I understand where you're coming from, but at the same point in time, Lucci, if anyone was gonna come back, Lucci had been set up and already has been given a lot of parallel feats to get him back to this level. Like, we already know that before Luffy, he was already clashing with Yonko in the form of Blackbeard. Like I said in the last stream, at that, like, he's been clashing with the revolutionaries and he's been clashing with Yonko crews since we were barely still fighting warlords post time skip. You know what I mean? So to me, like, especially in this chapter with what happens, I feel like Lucci is the only person I could definitively say in the world government's pocket that has the same growth rate potential as Luffy. I think they've, like, Oda's specifically gone like, this is the one guy that the world government has in pocket that has the identical, like, XP multiplier per fight that Luffy does.
I think it's the same.
Yep.
I think Luffy's outpaced him, like, exponentially.
Really? From this?
Yeah, for sure. I think Luffy shit on him in this.
I think specifically them showing what they did in this shows that he is fighting equal. I mean, he did something that Kaido wasn't able to do and clash equally with Gear 5 using Haki.
Luffy wasn't using Rio.
No, he wasn't. But Luffy... So, okay, the thing is, when Luffy was using Gear 5, he wasn't using Rio and Kaido, as far as we could see.
Yeah, true, but he wasn't actually, like... He wasn't even really clashing, was he? He used Rio in the final here, didn't he?
In the giant island-sized punch, yes. But...
Yeah.
But, what I will say is, the only time we see Luffy use Armament Haki against Kaido in Gear 5 is when he punches Kaido through the head, yeah? Where he does that, like he uses the Awakening to turn Kaido's guard off, right? And, like, that has Kaido spewing up blood. And that's regular Armament Haki, it wasn't Rio. Because you could see that, like, the after effect was that it was just regular Armament Haki, right? Lucci's clashing with it equally here.
I don't know if he's clashing with it equally. Like, here's the thing. It's not like if you both punch each other and none of you, like, completely and utterly overwhelms the other, doesn't mean you're equal in strength, right? Like, you have to be able to have fights where one person is able to clash against the other, even if one's stronger.
But this is different.
Like, at the end of the day, Lucci didn't even hit him, and Luffy absolutely wrecked the dude.
Well, Luffy did hit him in the sense because, like,
when Lucci didn't hit him.
Well,
Luffy was just goofing on him.
Lucci hasn't, and you are right there. Lucci hasn't hit him yet, right? But I would say in that regard, right, they've got the same potential growth rate. Luffy has the better fruit.
Right? I don't know, because, like, here's the thing, right? Is that, like, when you take Luffy versus Lucci back at his lobby,
yep.
Lucci had been trained for years and years and years, basically since he was a child, and he was considered a prodigy, and he'd been training really hard up until then. Luffy was like a 19-year-old punk who had been punched a bunch and thrown in the jungle.
Yep. However, even back then, they go panel for panel identical to this clash here.
Yeah, but, like, that's the thing, is that, like, Luffy was already essentially outpacing Lucci back then, and now he's a Yonko with a awakened better fruit than Lucci has.
I can understand that perspective, but I actually look at it from a slightly different vantage point, I should say, right? If you look at them pre-time skip when they clash, right? Look at it from the point where Lucci's somewhat gotten complacent because of his mission, where he's still the strongest and he still has the same... Think of it like if Lucci and Luffy take on the same fights, they get the same XP from it, whereas other people may get, like, different levels of XP from the same fights, you know what I mean? So they can grow at the same rate, right? Luffy obviously won that clash back then. Lucci hadn't been Lucci had just been a shipwright for, what was it, like 10 years? In an undercover op, you know what I mean? And, like, Luffy had come out. Luffy was really impressive because Luffy had gone through all these clashes fighting warlords and Commander-esque level people with NL and stuff like that. And he got shit on. He got low-diffed by Lucci when they first met. Twice. And then Luffy was able to identify and replicate the abilities of the Rokushiki techniques. And then instead of him shitting on Rob Lucci, they had a semi-equal fight that whole time. They were going blow for blow. And then when Luffy started to get the upper hand on Lucci because he was using more wild things like Gear 3 and stuff like that, and he was starting to get... Luffy did start to get the upper hand. Lucci closed that gap immediately, hitting him with the 3 Ryukogu guns. To the point where, unlike any other villain pre-time skip, Luffy almost gave up. If it wasn't for Usopp giving him a pep talk, Luffy gave up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, he didn't beat him like twice, like Crocodile did. You know what I mean?
Well, he did.
Like, fundamentally, like once Luffy, I mean, yeah, before he got Gear 2 and Gear 3, but like fundamentally, like once Luffy got Gear 2, Gear 3, like
yeah,
he won the fight. Like
But-
sure, it was incredibly hard. I'm not saying they weren't like pretty well equal. They definitely were pretty well equal. But since then, I think it's been like Luffy's been more actually fighting things, whereas Lucci's probably like training and doing like undercover assassinations and things like that's the thing. I think that's the difference between pirates is whereas pirates will consistently fight opponents, whereas CP agents will assassinate opponents. And generally speaking, you're not going to be fighting people that are your level or stronger on a mission. You're going to be sent overkill.
I
That's
would
the whole
agree.
point of being an assassin.
I would agree completely and wholeheartedly, except we don't know the events of post Enies Lobby to pre-time skip for Rob Lucci. Because post Enies Lobby, you've got the Rob Lucci cover series where he was disbanded from CP and the Marines and was actively being hunted down by the Marines.
And like he awakened his fruit, so he obviously got significantly stronger.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, somehow has like the mental willpower to not get overtaken by
Well-
his awakened fruit.
I have a huge theory on this as well that I'd love to go into detail to when we circle back around to that. When we start
Your
talking about
theory-
the awakening.
Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah. I think I know what your theory is.
I've talked about
but,
it a
like,
bit with you in the past.
Generally speaking, I think like Luffy is just like he's just winning. Like there's only one fight where they both just sort of collide fists and it sort of equals out. But like when you think about it, I don't know. The series just doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
okay.
Luffy was equaling out Kaido's fights, Kaido's blows reasonably early on within them fighting, and Luffy was not anywhere close.
I think you're I think you're taking I may have worded it wrong. Let me rephrase, right? Lucci is not dead equal with Luffy, right? Luffy
You
is
said he was clashing equally.
he is clashing equally.
Okay.
We know Luffy has all 3 types of haki and all 3 types of haki advanced, right? But unlike any other character in the entire series, Rob Lucci is the only person, and this clash is the perfect example of it, where physically and in at least base armament haki, he is perfectly equal with Luffy. To the point where neither of them win this clash. They both do the same damage to each other in the clash.
Can I explain what I saw during this fight?
Yep.
I saw Lucci tries to do a rapid fire finger pistol at Luffy.
And
Luffy dodges every single hit while basically laughing in his face. And then they do an equal clash where they punch each other's fists, which you kind of have to be able to do. Otherwise, every single fight in the entire series would be ultra one-sided. It's like whoever has better will win. You know what I mean? Like I'm saying, like Kaido was definitely stronger than Luffy, but at points in that fight, Luffy was equaling out his clashes. It doesn't mean that he's stronger. It just means that he can potentially equal out his clashes sometimes. He's not just going to get completely overwhelmed every single swing. I mean, even arguably, although she took damage, even arguably Yamato was like clashing against him. She was taking damage, but like, you know. And then Luffy then hits Lucci, causes him to cough blood. Then Lucci decides, oh, this is not happening. I've got to change tactics, and changes targets and hits Sentomaru. That's basically just like, all right, I'm not taking this guy out. I've got to get the Seraphim on my side. Hit Sentomaru so that they can take over the Seraphim, so they can use the Seraphim to fight Luffy. Like that's the whole point of this. Is like Lucci isn't as strong as Luffy, so he has to. So instead, he decides to take out Sentomaru to then control the Seraphim, and now next chapter, Luffy's basically gonna have to fight 3 Seraphim plus
Okay.
Lucci, and then also Kuma's probably gonna come in and maybe help Luffy or something.
So, yes and no. How? So okay, just going through my thought process for this, right? Because you are right with how you described it all, right? It comes in. Lucci, shows up with his awakening form. Luffy goes straight into Gear 5. Lucci does the finger pistols, and Luffy's just goofing around as Luffy does. I mean, he did the same thing against Kaido, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I'm more specifying on here is he matches a Gear 5 strike. And again, both of them are in awakenings here. Luffy's awakening should be superior. Luffy's fruit should be superior, full stop. It's a mythical zone. It, like, an awakened regular zone and an awakened mythical zone, right? There should almost be a full league difference, right? But what I'm saying is here, in terms of their physical strength and their physical armament hardening, they are depicted as dead equal here. More so than any other character that Luffy has fought, because they do that thing where their fists ripple and they both shoot back like an equal clash. The only time that's ever happened separately was when Luffy clashed with Katakuri, and Katakuri was only using his regular armament haki. He wasn't using his edged mochi, right? So what I'm saying here is, in this situation, what it's showing is, without us seeing whether or not Rob Lucci's capable of advanced armament, advanced conquerors, or advanced Rio, in terms of how physically strong his base armament is, it is currently equal to a Yonko Luffy. And
It's okay. Wait.
and
Wait.
wait,
It is currently equal to Yonko Luffy without Rio, and as far as we can tell, possibly without Conquerors.
Yes, but the thing about that is, right, that's a big difference, right? So what that
Between
is,
Rio and Conquerors.
what that is though, right? Because like we've talked about, right? When Luffy has clashed other people, right? He has had weaker haki than them in the past and still beaten people, right? He had weaker haki than Cracker and beat Cracker. He had weaker haki than Katakuri and beat Katakuri. He even specifies that he had weaker haki than Kaido at the end of the battle, but still beat Kaido, right? What I'm saying is Rob Lucci is being depicted here as having equal amount and equal potency to Luffy's haki. The difference being,
I would say,
wait, just wait.
like,
The difference being is Luffy then has the advanced forms on top of this. We don't know if Lucci has the advanced forms at all or not. But if Lucci did see and replicate the advanced forms, it should theoretically be as potent as Luffy based on this. With maybe the exception of
I don't
Conquerors.
know how that works though, because yeah, Conquerors is a ridiculously massive difference. And
Well,
also, like,
I would,
we don't know how Rio works.
I would
right?
say that how it works, like just going down the rabbit hole of this for a second, right? Is your haki is obviously based on your willpower, right? Luffy's willpower has gotten tremendously stronger post time skip, and it's been getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, right? But those techniques, we've seen examples of people with weaker haki use those techniques. You know what I mean? And they don't have necessarily the same effects. So it is a potency-based thing on your haki,
It's like,
plus the technique.
I get what you mean by like kind of like the base level of haki, but what I would ask is like, do you see Lucci fully powered up being able to trade evenly against Kaido?
I don't know yet, because I will say Luffy doing the same strike against Kaido made Kaido bleed and sent him packing. So, and that's without Rio and without Advanced Conquerors. So there is potential to turn around and say that Rob Lucci could clash equally with Kaido. The only problem is I haven't seen Lucci use Advanced Rio or Advanced Conquerors here. So if Kaido used Advanced Rio or Advanced Conquerors, right? It's up in the air. But I have seen Luffy with regular armament haki punch Kaido in his hybrid form and make him spew blood.
I'd assume though during that fight that he's using Conqueror armament, and
No.
given we don't know whether or not Luffy's using Conqueror armament here, so it could be that he's using Conqueror armament here as well. But I would assume that when Luffy was fighting Kaido in Gear 5 before, he was using Conqueror's armament.
I went back in the stream, like in my live reaction for it, and I had to check myself because I thought the same thing, right? Because I almost swear I remembered Kaido saying, like when he saw Gear 5, he goes, "Your skin turns white, you clad your whole body in advanced armament and advanced conquerors to fight," right? Do you remember like a comment like that?
I don't remember that at all, no.
No? Well, I could have sworn there was a comment like that. I went back and checked it. It's 1044, 45, right? And I've since made a whole thread about this. Kaido talks about it, and he goes, "You have the ability to use advanced conquerors, and you have the ability to use advanced armament. Your skin turns white, but your power is increased significantly, boy." And then he goes on to spiel about what awakenings are and that. And then Luffy, without using Rio and without using the visuals for advanced conquerors, punches Kaido in the face when he does that twirly fist, where he just like helicopters his arm and punches Kaido, right? Does that,
Right.
and it's shown the exact same way as it is here for Luffy.
How do you know he's not using Conquerors?
Because I'll whip it up right now. I will whip it up.
Because
right
remember, I think the punch that you were talking about didn't show his hand being black at all.
Yes, it does.
And then they went back and they kind of retconned that, and they said no, it actually should have been black.
No. So there was two separate things with that. There was Kaido's head. Originally in the scanlations and that, and it's still in the Viz version, right? Where it's different to the manga release. All right, and I will preface that. It's almost like you see the skin of Kaido's head stretched out, if that makes sense. It should be 1045 if you want to rip it up as well. So it's page 18, page 19 of 1045, right? You see that Luffy does that twirling punch and punches Kaido in the head. There's no advanced Rio and there's no advanced Conquerors on it, right? You see the normal lightning, no different as it is here. In the official manga volume release, the hand stretched through Kaido's head is black because it's supposed to say that his hair stretched out, right? But you see on the left panel that Luffy's arm is actually just regular armamented up.
How do you know the difference between regular armament and advanced armament?
Well, when it's advanced armament, it's always got the black spewing out of it, off the tip.
Yeah.
So the fact that Luffy's arm there is black and there isn't the haki cut, like the lightning coming off it, shows that it's not advanced conquerors.
I don't know if I've ever seen that distinction.
It is a bit that. So if you go back and look at the whole Kaido fight, and that's the only reason why I actually even question whether or not Katakuri has advanced conquerors, because it's the same thing where Katakuri, when he goes in the edge mochi, you've got the lightning's always coming off it, whereas the lightning will be there if they're charging up for a punch and clashing for a punch, but there'll be other times where they'll just be stationary and they won't have the lightning effect, whereas with the advanced conquerors, the lightning effect's always there. Because it actively is also like, and we saw this with the Big Mom versus Lauren Kid, that when you're using the advanced Conqueror's haki, it still actively knocks out fodder near you as well, because the Conqueror's is engaged.
That never happened during Luffy and Kaido's fight, though.
Well, we didn't see any fodder with the Luffy and Kaido's fight for fodder to be knocked out. But every time they were using advanced Conqueror's haki, you do see the lightning constantly on the arm.
I don't know if I've ever seen that distinction before.
I
feel like I remember him just normally, like, just having a black hand, and he's like, "Oh, I've got advanced conquerors now."
He's got the black hand, but there's always the lightning coming off it when he's using the advanced conquerors. I'll whip up the actual chapter. Because what? Advanced conquerors would have been like 1007, I want to say. Oh, that's Mr. Raccoon Dog. It's probably not that chapter. Let's say 1008 then. No, it's crazy that we're almost 70 chapters past the rooftop.
What do you think in Bima?
Oh no, I've just been. I don't know. Like,
What
gosh.
was your take like when you first read it without discussing it with us? What was your general like perception of how like
The
the
whole
the
Luffy
fight
Luke
between
versus
Luffy and
Lucci thing?
Bima? Yeah, Lucci versus.
Oh, jeez. Okay. So, my first interpretation of how I was looking at this, when I saw Lucci transform into that new form,
Mm.
my first thought was basically the quota is now slim down, buff up. But
Ooh, I do like that.
I
yeah, slim
really
down,
hyped
buff up.
about the awakening because I was like, okay, he can actually like, show some cool stuff, without it seeming ridiculous. Like he can
Mhm.
literally run for his
The
money with
whole
it.
thing that's just perplexing for me
Just to
is
pause
that
here for 1 second.
this whole new addition is that the black flame that's added to Lucci's form.
Yeah.
Oh,
Now,
this is what I got my whole theory on,
Lucci
man.
himself, I I honestly believe like I would be very like I'd be content if Lucci doesn't have Conqueror's hockey. Now I know a lot of people would probably say after this chapter, seeing that how he clashed with Luffy, he now has that black lightning going off. It's like, oh, Lucci's now like getting onto the same stepping stone as Luffy. He's awakened his hockey as well. But for me personally, I'm completely content with just Lucci being a standard Zoan that just happened to surpass his
Limits.
normal quota or what's expected of a Zoan. Because from what Jinbei said, most Zoans are supposed to lose their mind and just go completely down into like their rampant
Mm.
forms once they tap into this power. So for me now, like I'm looking back at who's who versus Jinbei, and I'm just thinking like who's who compared to Lucci now is probably a complete scrub.
Oh,
Yeah.
there was always a possibility of that. I feel like the who's entire thing was always going to be like this is what would have happened to Rob Lucci had he not gone back to the world government.
Hmm. And and this is also another thing why I really like Lucci staying as a quote unquote just average guy who happened to just train hard because it shows that despite like because everything is about will in One Piece, right? If you have the will, if you have the drive, you can always succeed. Now I know that sounds pretty corny because Luffy has lost when he's had the will and drive, but the fact that Lucci is one of the villains who Luffy decisively defeated, and despite losing everything, Lucci still got back up and built himself a new identity. Like
Uh,
even if he's still with the world government, Lucci still continued to train on. He still continued to evolve per se. And what I'm really mostly happy with now, not so much that Lucci was able to clash with Luffy, but just the fact that Lucci was able to keep up. I feel like a lot of people kind of like overlook that because I know that Luffy hasn't hit Luffy yet or anything. Like we literally have Luffy in this one panel that's just moving his head around and Lucci's like trying to take like a finger pointer and literally stab it in his head. But the fact that Luffy's just not getting like low diff outsped, like I personally for me, I was expecting like a Blue No moment, right? When Blue Nose told Luffy, "Oh yeah, well try to hit me now," and then Luffy ends up just sending him like a good 30 feet back.
mm.
But no, that didn't happen. Lucci's still holding firm, and well, it's just again these black flames are just confusing me because
I
I mean we didn't see any kind of like black flames from when Kaido showed his
I
like
I think my
his new
theory will
form.
explain this really well, and I think there's a clear line that's drawn between them, to the point where like I feel almost confident enough to say that I'm like on the money, and I'll go through it. But if you want, my Twitter that's always linked in like the description and stuff like that, it's pinned to the top of my Twitter thread at the moment with the panels side by side to make it easier to go through. Right? I went on this.
Mhm.
I went on like a 20 tweet tangent about this last night. But two things. One, chapter 1010 is when the Advanced Conquerors is first shown, and specifically, what I say is the difference is whenever someone with armament haki clashes with someone else with armament haki, right? You always get that black lightning. So Luffy versus Lucci here, that's not an indicator that Lucci has Conqueror's haki or Luffy's using Conqueror's haki, right? That black lightning's always present in a clash. However, the difference is the haki spewing forth from the person before they attack and while they're moving is what happens when they're using the advanced Conquerors. If that makes sense. So from chapter 1010 onwards, from page 14 onwards, just for a good reference. However, while you guys potentially look at that, and I'll like to preface, right, one of the reasons why I don't think Lucci has Conqueror's haki is specifically like when he's doing the finger pistols against Luffy, right? There's no advanced Conquerors like spewing off his arm, even though he's got his arm clad black this like whole chapter. You know what I mean? Same with at the end when he does the handgun. That's why I think Lucci here is just using regular armament, and same with Luffy, right? But the problem is Luffy using regular armament, if you go to chapter 1045, is way more impressive in Gear 5 than it is outside of Gear 5, because Luffy in Gear 5, his strikes are like, there were strikes that Luffy was doing against Kaido where he wasn't using haki in Gear 5. And it was hurting Kaido. You know what I mean? So it's like, the problem I have here isn't that like Luffy's not using advanced armament hakis and stuff like that. Because realistically, right, how I view Lucci here is, as much as it pains me to say, he's showing relativity above the first commanders. I don't want to say he beats the first commanders at this point, because I need to see a bit more from him. But the unfortunately is, like, because, like, I can't say that he beats King, because although he's clashing equally with Luffy here, we never saw Luffy fight King, and the only person that we saw fight King was Zoro, who used advanced Conqueror's haki to hurt Zoro. Now, although Luffy could hurt Kaido without advanced Conqueror's haki in Gear 5, we know that King had a higher defense than Kaido, so that there's still, like, a potential difference there, you know what I mean? As much as, like, I don't know how to, like, pick it up in either way, there is a potential difference that, like, just zones in. The difference as well is, I don't know how Lucci, without saying more of him, would handle the likes of, like, Katakuri, because of, like, the evasive nature of his abilities and that. Maybe the Ryukoku gun could, like, do some area of effect damage that could help him in those situations, but the problem is, it's like, what he's showcasing here is an equal clash with someone that's stronger than those First Division commanders, by far, in my opinion. But the rest of his skill set, we haven't seen enough to see whether or not he would actually beat any of those people. Whereas the Second Division commanders, I think Rob Lucci's like dog walking through at the moment. So, like, the way I'm looking at Lucci here is like the Haki and Devil Fruit equivalent of like Law at the moment. You know what I mean? Although I would say the Haki's better from Lucci based on the fact that he's clashing with Luffy. I don't think Law can clash with Luffy's Haki in that regard. But are you ready for a really fucked up theory here? A long theory, right?
All right, shoot it.
So we now have actually had a handful, like a fair decent amount of awakenings, right? Yeah. Again, I'm also going to reference back to chapter 1044 or 1045 for Kaido talking about awakenings. And I want to say 785 or 86 for Doflamingo talking about awakenings. In both situations, when we have an explanation given about awakenings, it's Doflamingo giving a self-explanation about a Paramecia's awakening, right? And when Kaido talks about awakening, he corrects himself and actually explains a Paramecia's awakening because he thinks Luffy's a Paramecia, albeit an odd Paramecia. So we actually haven't had an explanation of awakenings for a Zone or a Logia outside of Crocodile back in Impel Down talking about they just get increased endurance and recovery, right? The important thing about that is where Kaido talks about how a awakened Devil Fruit is when you awaken your Devil Fruit, it's your mind and body catching up with the abilities of your fruit, right? I would like to raise the premise of you can awaken or have an incomplete awakening, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Where you
Exactly what we're about to say.
Yeah, where you can awaken your fruit and get all the effects of the fruit, right? But it actually happens in 3 different ways, and there's 3 different types of awakening specifically for zones, right? Again, I've got this on Twitter if you want to bring up my Twitter in that, because I've got like a visual representation that makes this a lot easier to go through. But we've got the best example of the most common types of awakenings we've seen so far are paramecias. All of them have given the users the ability to affect things other than themselves, right? Doflamingo could turn the countryside into string. Law can attach his room to other objects or people. Kid can turn other people into magnetic conductors, right? Those are the... Katakuri also could turn the surrounding world into mochi, right? So that's a paramecia awakening. Notice how there's no paramecia awakening though that they've had the Neo Cloud, which is that like flame stuff around them, right? Now, a lot of people have incorrectly assumed that Kaido has one in his dragon form. That's the flame clouds. It actually never wraps around his neck and that in the manga. He actually lays on top of the flame clouds. So it is different, right? With zones, the first time we see awakenings is in Impel Down, where you have the jail beast guards, which are... They've got a little bit of human midriff, but other than that, they're all animal, and they've all got the minds of their animals, correct? The thing about that is, as we've been told from the Gorosei and other countless sources, right? Zone, and including data books and stuff like that now, zones have a mind of their own that no other devil fruits have, as far as we know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the awakening of a zone would be different to the awakening of a paramecia. So Kaido and Doflamingo's explanation of what an awakening is in reference specifically to a paramecia, right? So they don't necessarily give us a full story. If you awaken your zone, I believe there's 3 possible outcomes. Outcome 1, the zone, the mind of the zone consumes you, in which case you get the situation where you have the Impel Down guards. So that's Minotaurus, Minochihuahua, Minozebra, Minokoala, and I can't remember which one I didn't just say then. They're all the Minnow whatevers, right? I also think that is actually what happens potentially when Chopper goes Monster Point, right?
Where previously or even now?
Previously and now, except the difference is, because he's manipulating it with chemicals, it's not a proper awakening. So it doesn't get like the full strength boost of an awakening, right? But like I do have to point out, like, we've rarely seen Chopper go Monster Point, and although he's been dicked on in that, best example I can think of is in Punk Hazard, right? When Chopper turns into... When Frankie's in Chopper's body and they're fighting the Yeti Cool Brothers, Frankie has the rubble balls and goes Monster Point, and he doesn't have the control over the Monster Point like Chopper does post-time skip, right? Frankie picks up a mountain of ice and throws it in Chopper's body. So Chopper's like Monster Point is really fucking strong, but when Chopper's in charge of it, it isn't. It is actually severely nerfed, right? So you got zones where the zone personality takes over. I think we also have the example, potentially, of when a person takes over the zone's personality. This one's going to be a bit harder to explain, but I think this is an example of Kaido. I think Kaido's body has caught up to his awakening, but his mind hasn't. That's not to say that he's not capable of thinking what his awakening is, but I think a true perfect awakening is what we see when we see the Neo Clouds around them, where the personality of the Devil Fruit Eater is synergized with the personality and the wants of the animal of their zone, right? In the example of Luffy, right? He has always wanted to free people that are oppressed, right? Which aligns with the warrior of liberation, wanting to make people laugh and make people happy and free people, right? Rob Lucci has awakened his zone now, and we see that here. He's got the same flame dragon sort of stuff. Like, he's got the flaming Neo Cloud, the proper Neo Cloud. He is, and always has been, no different to his fruit, where he's been a bloodthirsty killer. His fruit wants to kill and hunt. He wants to kill and hunt. It's actually specifically the reason why he even joined the world government in the first place, so he could have a license to kill. Right? There is potential flaws in this logic. For example, right? I don't know if you guys remember too well the version 2 hybrid version of Kaido, where he goes drunken, where he's in his drunken rage.
Yep, when he goes drunken and when he starts a flirtish mode too.
When he's specifically in his drunken mode, he's in a different form. It's not so when he's in his, like, say, drunken beggar mode and stuff like that, he's in previous forms. He's in his version 1 hybrid form or in his dragon form when he's thieving drunk and that. So those are personality traits, right? When he goes in his drunken murderous form, his form changes again, where he actually looks like Lucci here, just without the Neo Cloud, where he's got the flaming eyebrows, the flaming chin beard, and all that stuff. And it actually looks like an awakening just without the cloud. The thing is, what would the will of a dragon be? Well, a dragon in One Piece, and specifically in the lore here, is an invincible god that wants to rule over and, like, you know, it's a dominant force, right? Which sounds like Kaido, except for the fact that Kaido actively was wanting someone to come along to beat him. So he wasn't synergized with the wants of his fruit. He had the unfortunate abilities of being invincible, almost, with his fruit. And his fruit would want to stay invincible, essentially. But he himself actually wanted to lose, but he wanted to lose against someone that was worthy. So he's kind of going against his ability there, right? Now, this potentially falls apart a little bit with the next person I'm going to bring up, but Yamato also has the Neo Clouds. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Yamato's necessarily awakened or not, because there's no information on it, you know what I mean? It's not stated, it's not stated, you know what I mean? But what I will say is Yamato, her fruit is regarded as the guardian deity of Wano. And that fruit has been the guardian deity of Wano for generations, right? Her personality is that she wanted to protect and save Wano. So whether or not she's awakened or not, she's synergized with that fruit, so she started to develop that Neo Cloud, if that makes sense. I think there's also examples semi along the lines of what Kaido was talking about, where if your mind catches up with your devil fruit, you may develop the Neo Cloud. Or if your body catches up with the devil fruit, you'll get the awakening form, but you won't get the Neo Cloud. But like a true awakening is having both, if that makes sense. And I think like there is a clear line drawn in the sand between all of these people based on their personalities, based on their fruits, and based on how it's visually represented between them.
To kind of summarize, if you're mentally aligned with your fruit, you get the Neo Cloud. If you're physically aligned with the fruit, you get what? You just get to awaken in general.
You get like a version 2 hybrid.
Version 2 hybrid.
Right. So Kaido with the flame eyebrows and the flame chin, the Luffy Gear 5 form that we see here, the Rob Lucci, because notice this Rob Lucci form is different to his hybrid and his life return.
Yeah. Do you think that Luffy is double awakened, essentially, if we want to call it that?
Yes, and I will say why.
Kaido's only single awakened.
Luffy, yes. So Luffy, and I'll draw the clear line here. Luffy's body caught up before his mind. Notice how Luffy was like, I don't want to be a hero. I don't want to be the guy that people look out to. Pre-time skip, and even at the beginning of post-time skip, right? That actually kind of goes against the idea of the warrior of liberation, doesn't it? But Luffy's body physically caught up with his abilities before his temperament did, before his mind did. That's Gear 4. Gear 4, he's got the Neo Cloud too, doesn't he? in Gear 4, Kaido even mentions, right, you're doing things that rubber can't physically do by constantly extending your arm. When he does, like, the Gear 4 punches. Right?
Yeah.
So that would be his body caught up before his mind. And it's weird because he does have the cloud as well, right? But at that time when Luffy first whips out Gear 4 is when he's actively going like, I want to free Dressrosa from your oppressive regime and shit like that. You know what I mean? So it's like he's teetering on his awakening. It's just he hasn't pushed himself that like to that breaking point like he did with Kaido.
Okay, that is different to what I thought you were going to say. I
What
thought you were going to say that there are like I thought I got it close.
Yep.
Basically, I thought you were going to say there's like a mental aspect to it, like you need to be like mentally competent enough, and then there's also a physical aspect to it, which is and basically what happens is if you're physically capable enough, then you can awaken. Then there's also the difference between if you're also mentally capable enough or not, and if you're not, then you essentially just take on the traits of whatever you turn into. So for the crazy animals, you just turn into a crazy animal. For Luffy, you turn into Nika, like the personality of Nika. Um, and I thought what you were leaning towards is basically Lucci has both. He's mentally able to keep himself while turning into an awakening form, whereas Luffy turns into Nika and loses a part of his personality, and that's why he's like laughing and acting so goofy all the time. And that if he can actually awaken mentally as well, then he'll be able to control the Nika form way better, and he'll be a lot stronger because he won't be so stupid all the time.
I would say that is definitely possible, and like I said, like mine, that's why I put mine down in the written form on Twitter. Like I said, it's pinned, just because there's so many different people and aspects in this that it connects to. I actually noted at the end of it as well that there's a potential for a teaser of what a Logia awakening is. Because apart from this, there's only one other person that we've seen in the entire series of One Piece that's had a Neo Cloud, and that was Enel in his Amaru form, right? That could be because Enel was a false god, and he was manufacturing that Neo Cloud himself to have the visual representation, right? Or it's also possible because again, he whips out that Amaru form for like the last second against Luffy, thinking he's going to be able to easily completely obliterate him, but because Luffy's rubber, using more lightning-based abilities isn't going to help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the important thing is, if you have a Paramecia awakening and it affects your surroundings, right? You have a Zone awakening where it increases your body's physical stats and your recovery rate and gives you a form change, right? With the Neo Cloud if you're aligned with your fruit. If a Logia is genuinely the best fruit, what if it does both? Right? So, say in that theoretical mindset, Enel was awakened, but he got low diffed in his awakening, as sad as that would be, right? But you get as a Logia, this is going to be a really like odd conceptual thing here, right? But zones have a mind of their own, right?
Yeah.
But it's talked about a lot in a weird way that elements have their own nature as well, or their own will almost. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right.
An example I'd like to give is they say lightning never strikes twice.
And like to be like going along with that, Vegapunk even kind of says he kind of alludes to the idea that like the devil fruits were basically just kind of like how I sort of took it as they were basically just like willed into existence if they were needed. We're just like I really want to turn into magma, and then they just turn into magma. Or at least a fruit spawned that lets them do that. So that kind of goes along with what you were saying, like, yeah, the fruit kind of has like its will of its own because it'll seek out the person who really wants to turn into magma, or not consciously, but like they have that nature
yes.
of
So
magma-like nature.
We ironically talk a lot about how with the Marines with their Logias, it's actually like the opposite of their personality, almost.
Yes.
Right. That's fair.
But the thing about that is the Marines are potentially gifted their fruits. the fruit doesn't seek them out almost.
Yeah. Right. That's
Whereas,
fair.
say, pirates and people that are out in the natural world may be more aligned to actually get fruits that actually belong or call to them in those regards. Right?
Yeah.
Where there's a will, there's a way. But what I'm specifying is, right, when NL does his form change, he turns into a giant Buddha-esque lightning, right?
Yes.
With the big Neo cloud. It's got his Amaru, right? If that's part of his awakening and that's the form change, and we didn't get to see it happen because Luffy beat him immediately, but the other part of his awakening would be he's able to turn his surrounding environment into lightning or sources of lightning. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So it'd be sharing the attributes of both an awakened zone and an awakened Logia. Another thing about that also supports this is a big thing about the awakened zones is they've got a really fast recovery rate, right?
Yeah.
Luffy hits goddamn NL with 300 ton of gold to the face and knocks him clean out. And the next chapter, he's back up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And yes,
saying that Logias have they have that recovery rate as well.
Potentially. And again, I don't want to linger on the NL thing because that's a huge reach. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's a huge reach, but
you're reaching for the sky.
But looking at the rest of this and how the other awakenings are going, I find it really interesting and really funny how from the beginning of the series we were told it goes Paramecias, Zones, Logias, right? And then it got to the point where it was like, dude, fuck everything else. Paramecias and their awakenings are busted. They're so good. You know what I mean? And now it's kind of like, oh, dude, screw having anything other than a zone. You got mythical zones that got busted abilities, even regular zones like LUCCI here. You get so many good stats in that. It's following that same natural progression because Oda's saving the best for last, which is Logias.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Have they ever made a direct statement on which is stronger, or have they just said rarer? Like more
just
like
rarity.
desired?
Just rarity.
They've said
because
no,
they did say that did say that ancient. Oh no, sorry, not ancient.
They've commented on what is stronger.
Zoans are even rarer than Logias.
They have commented on what is stronger, but in what way they describe what is stronger has been it's very bare bones, right? They said so back in Drum Island, I think it is. They were like for physical attacks. So it's like Paramecias give you all sorts of abilities, but for physical attacks, zones are clearly the best. And I think they also said that in Ennie's lobby, right?
Yep.
But they
when
also
they
said
Dalton changing into his bison form, and then when they saw LUCCI and Kaku also take on their.
But they've also said after those statements, I'm pretty sure, even rarer yet, Logias in their near invincible forms. So whenever they talk about them, they always talk about how like you get really sick random abilities with the Paramecia, but zones are just like generally better for physical combat. But Logias are always regarded to as almost invincible. And
yeah, because you also have to think like all because a guy unlocks armament hockey and stuff. I mean, when you're fighting against a Logia, you still gotta get close to the guy, and I can't imagine like
what's armament hockey gonna do against Caesar from a distance?
Yeah, a fun little theory. You know how you said that like the admirals are kind of like the opposite of their fruits.
Mm-hmm.
Like Akinu, while he does wear the Mahalo shirt and he looks like he's kind of chill, he's actually a bit hot-headed.
Yep.
It would be cool to see that, like, generally speaking, the world government or the world nobles will give the opposite of their nature so that they can never awaken because being awakened is too powerful.
Or
and they want to be able to control them. And then Akainu awakens because it turns out, even though he wears the chill-ass Mahalo shirt, and they were like, oh, he'll take magma then, turns out he's actually a massive hothead.
What if it's? I mean, like that
cool.
sounds sick as anything. But what if it's also just a tweak on that, right? What if it's they give it to people with the opposite personality so that if they do awaken, they don't ever get overwhelmed. Because the thing you got to think of as well is the world government has a monopoly on awakenings. They've got 5 awakened zones, 6 now with LUCCI, right? I don't see any reason why Kaku shouldn't be awakened here as well.
What would an awakened
It's
giraffe
hard to
look like?
determine what the personality of a giraffe is. That's just like I'm just gonna chill.
Well, see,
Hey, bro, no. Have you ever
Please.
seen a giraffe actually in the wild when it's competing
The
for like
savage?
nature stuff? Bro,
Uh,
seeing them swing their head like size is actually pretty insane.
well, remember Kaku when he first got his fruit, everyone was making fun of him. He's like, "No, fuck you. I love giraffes. I love giraffes. Giraffes are cool." You know what I mean?
Pretty sure someone told me once there was like a video of a giraffe back kicking a hippo in the head, and it like killed it instantly.
Yeah.
It just broke its spine and just killed it.
So
Yeah, man, giraffes are the definition of slim but buff.
and I'd like to point out, right, all of Kaku's forms pre-time skip, he literally made within an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And he was coming up with some sick forms on the fly. So he was gaining really fast control over his fruit, all things considered.
Yeah.
Like he
I
was
mean,
able to
in
go
a
from
way,
giraffe
like-
form to giraffe hybrid form to I can pull my neck in and make my limbs longer. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, like
he was doing some almost Gear 4 level shit with his fruit in an
yeah, I
hour.
mean, like, would you guys argue personally for me when I was watching that Zoro versus Kaku fight? Honest to God, I felt like kind of Kaku kind of surpassed Lucci and what was that other guy, the
Jabra.
Wolf Boy?
Jabra.
Yeah, Jabra. I think Kaku, in terms of growth, at least for that moment, it seemed to me like Kaku actually had the most potential.
So, do you know what the problem is in that whole situation? The Rokushiki, what's it called? The Doriki, right? Doriki
Yeah, Doriki.
only measures your physical striking abilities. So it's muscle mass almost. You know what I mean? It's your tensile strength, right? It doesn't take into consideration anything else. Doesn't take into consideration your Rokushiki. Doesn't take into consideration your zone transformations or anything like that. It's just your base
I will
human
say
physical
that,
strength.
like, did hype up Lucci quite a lot, and they did talk about how much he's like a prodigy and stuff, and like even like Kaku kind of like looked up to him in a sense. But like, so basically, like the way that I kind of saw it was the wolf guy had not the best in terms of like the strongest defensively, but he was more advanced technique wise in the iron body because he could move
Yeah.
while he did it.
Yeah.
And then the giraffe dude had the better projectile
Soru.
slash
Yeah.
attacks. And then Lucci was just kind of like better at base in
See-
terms of just like physical capabilities
Do you-
at everything.
Do you know what
Yeah,
the
but
problem?
you also have to think too,
Is
because
behind on those two things.
Pre-time skip, they like as impressive as they all were as individuals. Some like even the weaker members did certain things better than some of the better members of CP9. Like you're pretty bang on with the analyzing of it there. But you got to remember, right? When Kaku and Rob Lucci left for their 10-year mission, right? Jabra and Rob Lucci were similar in Doriki, right? And both, you know, they had the wolf and the cat zone, like the leopard zone, right? They come back from that 10 years, and like, you know, with, you know, recent, like, Rob Lucci didn't necessarily go out there and train every day, but he was getting progressively stronger, whereas Jabra sort of not plateaued, but didn't grow as much, I would say, right? And
yeah, but Jabra was suffering from heartbreak.
again, you gotta remember as well. Jabra was introduced into the series having being like we're just vocally like his rap sheet on introduction is, oh, you've successfully assassinated another revolutionary commander. In those clear as day words, you know what I mean? So it's like he's been doing stuff, but at the same time, he wasn't as strong as the others. He was super shocked when Kaku came back and had a Doriki 20 more than him, right? That's jack shit. The easiest thing to remember is like Jabra had a Doriki of 2,180 and Kaku had 2,200. Rob Lucci had 4,000, right? That's divide that by 10, and that's how many times stronger than the regular person they are in their human form, right? So Kaku and Jabra are essentially 220 times stronger than a normal person. physically without using any of their abilities. Rob Lucci's 400 times physically stronger than the normal person without using any of his abilities pre-time skip. You know what I mean?
Another important point to make as well is that, again, like Jabra and Lucci had their devil fruits. I mean, I don't know how long they've had them, but when they got tested, Kaku didn't have the devil fruit yet.
No, he didn't.
So, honest to God, I would
Feel a
I
little
would
bit physically
want to
stronger,
say
yeah.
that Kaku's potential, probably, if he had been able to master his devil fruit, he might have jumped up to 3,000.
But I will say the important thing there is that Doriki test doesn't take into consideration Lucci or Jabra's devil fruit either. Jabra has a carnivorous zone like Lucci. Kaku has a herbivorous zone, a herbivore. So it's not as bloodthirsty. So he doesn't get as much of that like strength boost, which is another aspect of the zones that we've been told about. You know what I mean? So, and they do that to keep, they always keep like the number 2 and number 3, like, oh, who's stronger? They've got this, they've got that, you know what I mean? There's always like a little clear slight edge for number 2, but it's always like neck and neck, right? But what I will say is, whether or not it was planned at the time or retcon, whatever you want to call it, it's now confirmed that the 6 powers are Haki. So you got to think, Jabra was the only person that could use armament Haki while moving pre-time skip.
Yeah.
Out of CP9, you know what I mean? And when Sanji beat him, which is I've always found this really interesting. When Sanji clashed against him and beat him with Diablo Jumbe, the Diablo Jumbe bypassed that Haki defense and it burnt him from the inside out. So he got done arguably by a type of Juroneck. We haven't really seen Sanji have to fight many people that he needs Juroneck against. Especially not when, like, it's easier to, like, the Juroneck is only as potent as you are strong as well, and no offense to Sanji, post-time skip, he wasn't the strongest. So
no, he was not.
So it's like, having Juroneck, like, that, like, if you've got Juroneck, but you can only throw a punch, like, rolling a 1, like a nat 1 on a d20, it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? But the difference in the abilities between those CP members at the time, like, Jabra was able to go full body armament Haki. He was able to do moonwalk like a crazy dude. Yes, he was a sly dude, but one of the really important things is he was able to do the Rokoshiki, the Soru kicks that moved. His wolf kicks that chased you. You know what I mean? That's something that even Kaku and Lucci hasn't done.
Yeah, but Sanji's fights usually tend to lean more towards, I guess, technique over brute strength. I'm not saying that Sanji like isn't a powerhouse hitter or anything, but like just historically, Sanji's always been faced off against guys who are like at least a tad more clever when it comes to diversifying their arsenals in the battlefield.
But the thing is, when you look at Kaku, then when Kaku fought Zoro, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Kaku was nowhere near as good at using Iron Body. In fact, he only used it once against Zoro, and he successfully defended once against Zoro and then never used it again. You know what I mean? And he was goofing around because, like, outside of all the CP members, Kaku, he's from the East Blue. He's got that straw hat dumbass mentality of just goofing around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Kaku would probably fit right into the Straw Hat Pirates.
He would have loved it. He could have been our assistant shipwright if things were different.
He could have been our Zoan.
But, right, Kaku fighting Zoro, Kaku was goofing around trying to learn his Devil Fruit quick, which, you've just got this brand new ultimate ability. Who wouldn't want to try and figure it out quick and do some cool shit? And he did some amazing stuff with it, right? But his big thing was the projectile slashes with the Soru. Outside of that, he used Paper Body once and wasn't able to use it quick enough to dodge Zoro's slashes. So instead of evading, he just tried to keep pressure on Zoro with a series of overwhelming slashes. Kaku wasn't all that impressive.
Yeah, Kaku's approach to that fight midway through was more so aggro instead of he was more proactive than reactive.
Yeah. Whereas like and I would say Jabra was like a lot more reactive. Kaku was more proactive. Rob Lucci was balancing both, if that makes sense. Which, dude, I would love to see them come back. But so whether or not you agree with me or not about how well Lucci's going against Luffy here, right? I think we can all agree that the way this chapter ends is CP0 trying to take the command over from Sentomaru, right? For the Seraphim?
Yep.
The most impressively crazy thing then is that means CP is going to have 4 Seraphim on standby here on their side, yeah? Now, although Vegapunk can still give them orders, which could fuck with them, right? You've got 4 Seraphim. You've got Lucci, who's currently clashing equally enough with Gear 5, right? But we also found out that the Marines were already intending on coming and helping CP here for this mission of taking out Vegapunk, right?
Yeah. We might get a few scenes of that new Vice Admiral as well, Doll.
Yeah, so I was about to say, if that's the case, I dare say that Kizaru was at G14 since it's the closest naval base to Egghead. In which case, the people that were on G14 at the moment is, if Kizaru's bringing them, right? You've got Kizaru, who's an admiral. You've got Dole, who's a vice admiral. You've got Prince Gruss, who's a rear admiral. You've got Captain Dashigi. And then you've got Lieutenant Kobe and Commander Hibari, who is in that order. Each immediate
Don't forget
rank.
about Helmeppo.
Well, no, that Helmeppo's a lieutenant, right? Lieutenant Commander. So that's each consecutive that's the top. What there was admiral, vice admiral, rear admiral, captain, lieutenant. So that's the top 6 positions of the Navy. You know what I mean? So you've got, in descending order of each rank, someone from each each top 6 ranks of the Navy. You've got 4 Seraphim, and then you've got 3 CP0 members here that are about to potentially be a force. And they are actively talking about how this could just randomly turn into an all-out war. Against the Straw Hats, that would be a fucking decent force to bring.
Yeah, I mean, oh gosh.
Like, if Lucci continues fighting Luffy, I mean, I know that Lucci's probably going to lose to Luffy, and like I'd bet more money on Lucci losing to Luffy, right? But there's equivalent enough that it's not going to be done instantaneously. Especially when, even though Luffy hits him with his mole attack here, which turns it around to rubber to strike Lucci, notice at the very end of the chapter that he's completely clean. No scratch marks on him.
I'd like to say something positive about Lucci.
Oh, go!
If he's mastered the
6 powers
while you're moving Iron Body, so he's basically permanently an Iron Body, and his Iron Body is even better than it currently is, which it will be. Plus, he's got Wake and Zoan toughness and recovery. He could have Yonko level durability and tankiness. Could basically be as hard to hurt him as it would be Big Mom.
Yep.
Which is like one aspect where he could be like Yonko level.
And he doesn't need to have... So that's also... I love how you brought that up. He doesn't need to all around be Yonko level. The thing is, from this stretch until the end of the story, these people don't need to be all round Yonko level. But if they have a Yonko level aspect, it still means Luffy has to bring out top tier attacks to fight.
Like, for example, I'm already putting Lucci above First Division. Any First Division he's taking.
I'm impressed to hear you say that.
I don't think he's like actually been like fully goofed on. I just think like he's definitely losing this fight.
Okay, so taking that into consideration, we also have to look at the first commanders that are available. Like, we know nothing of Ben Beckman, so I kind of just want to put him on the shelf for now. Like, I know
Honestly,
People will hate that, but we just don't know
the
enough
more
about
time that goes on, the more I'm actually losing faith in Ben Beckman, especially after seeing
Yeah.
film Red, where I'm like, oh, okay, he's Ben. That's all he needs to be. He doesn't need to act like he's as strong as the story needs in a scene. You know what I mean?
it. Yeah. So, putting this awakened Zoan Lucci right now up against King and Katakuri. So those two guys are the biggest. Like those guys are the only hurdles that are barring Lucci from entering into above
First commander
first
range.
commander level. So I don't know. I'm just thinking like Katakuri, right? Like even his fight against Luffy, I still want to say the fight ended 50-50. I know a lot of people say that Luffy won,
No,
but
Katakuri won.
good. Katakuri was still well over able to continue fighting. He just lost the will battle.
I
That's how
actively see it as Katakuri would have beat Luffy and could have keep beating Luffy. But Luffy, if he ate a sensu bean right at the end of that fight, like say when he went to Wano, right? If they were to go back and refight, Luffy's winning. And me and Eggs have had this conversation so many times, right? But Katakuri literally had his balls out in Luffy's face for 12 hours. Right? He was tormented. He was bullying this boy.
Hang on, I think what you just said was like absolutely exactly what I think is true, and I don't remember us agreeing on this.
Well,
If they would have both had a sensu bean right there and then, Luffy just outright wins.
See, no. See, the
Brule just ripped open.
The problem is Katakuri
DBZ and came back in.
I'm talking about like if the fight had kept going, right? Luffy would have lost. Because Katakuri...
Luffy has a really bad history of winning battles.
He was already like way more beat up than
Yes, but essentially what I'm saying, right, is if Luffy and Katakuri didn't need a time limit and they both started and the fight continued as it was, Katakuri was going to beat Luffy, right? He beat Luffy, right? But after that fight, because of Luffy's XP growth, right, he would have beaten beaten Katakuri in... It goes from an extreme diff loss to a high diff win. Maybe a mid-high diff, but I say high diff because it still would have taken a long time.
That's the thing. I fully agree with that because my entire argument the whole time was at the end of that fight, Luffy was stronger than Katakuri. As in, if they were to fight again at full health, Luffy wins.
See, the problem is, like, and yes, I'll agree with that. Right?
The only irk that I had was that even going into Wano, even like halfway through Wano, people were still saying Katakuri is stronger than Luffy.
The problem is Luffy learning Rio, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's hard because Luffy's edge mochi is very most likely Advanced Conquerors. It like at this point in time, we haven't.
So the thing is though is that so the problem with that is you say it's Advanced Conquerors, and then you think about how much stronger Luffy got when he learnt Advanced Conquerors, and you equate that with Katakuri's strength.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is just look at what it did to Luffy, and look at how often Katakuri actually used it, and look at how close their fight actually was, right? So just because it's possible that it could have been Advanced Conquerors doesn't mean, therefore, Katakuri has Advanced Conquerors, therefore, Katakuri is
exactly
Luffy plus the power
I agree with that. The problem is
people oftentimes, like One Piece fans, oftentimes like equate those things. Like he has Rio, therefore he's as strong as anyone we've ever seen that has Rio, which is just like not necessarily true.
The problem I have is the more we find out, right? Katakuri's specific words were there are even levels to armament, right? And we take that as it's armament level 2. You know what I mean? It goes beyond hardening, but really saying that there are levels to armament could simply mean you can arm yourself with conquerors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's a synonym game, but if you look at the effects are the same as Advanced Conquerors. He knocked the wind out of Gear 4 Luffy in a single punch with it. You know what I mean? So it's like he was doing what Kaido was doing, but like in a weaker form, which is what you would expect between the difference between a first commander and a Yonko in their Haki levels. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The only thing is, like, the only problem with that is that, like, he didn't use it enough.
Yes.
It's like talking about like law
Yep.
fighting. It's like, yeah, he can make his swords like him versus Virgo. Like he can just cut the entire island in half. It's like, okay, cool. Then why hasn't he done it since?
Which is the problem
Why doesn't
I
he just do
have.
it against anyone he ever faces ever and just one shot everyone?
Yeah,
Which is the problem I have with
more the
Luffy.
consistency, if anything, though. That's not really on the characters themselves.
That's why I
Yeah.
was like, and you know me back in the day, I was like, oh, you know, Katakuri was going to beat Luffy again. The problem I have is like, Luffy. If Luffy's only ever one thing away from beating you, it doesn't matter if he goes into the fight without that one thing. He will get that thing in the fight and fuck you up. Right? So Luffy versus Katakuri, when it first happened, Luffy didn't have advanced armor, like the Conqueror's coding or advanced armament, and the future sight, right? So what happened? Luffy grinded, got the future sight, so Katakuri started whipping out the advanced armament, and then Luffy was like, I need a timeout. I've got stuff to do. You know what I mean? Where
I don't know if Katakuri could just like willy-nilly use advanced armament. Because I do think that he was fighting at his hardest.
Just hear me out on this. Hear me out on this. Although he was fighting at his hardest, the problem is the fight. Like, this is a conversation we've had in the past, right? Where remember when we were reading the Kaido fight week to week, and I was saying Kaido's still got more up his sleeve, and you were like, Kaido's fighting at his hardest because he's trying to beat Luffy. And each and every week, Kaido was whipping out new abilities and new forms, right?
Yeah, but that's just keeping the fight interesting, though, right?
But it's the same thing with Katakuri, where that fight ended at the halfway point.
I guess, like, with that said, right, when I say they're fighting at their hardest, I mean, they're not, like, intentionally just fucking around. Like,
yeah.
Like Goku was fighting his hardest against Frieza before he went Super Saiyan.
Yeah.
He went Super Saiyan, and then he just kicked his ass. But it's like he was still fighting at his hardest. It's
Yes.
just, like, plot-wise, he hasn't whipped out. They don't whip out their final move until the final move.
They don't have a run sheet of like, I have to use this one ability after the other and like keep scaling. The next ability is going to be a little bit stronger each and every time, right?
Yeah.
They throw a handful of them at a board, and whatever fucking sticks is what makes it in the fight. But that's the point I was making, where it was like Luffy caught up on the observation haki. He didn't catch up on the armament haki in that fight. So Katakuri at the end of that fight was stronger than Luffy. If they were to start that fight again, though, Luffy's only one thing away. Luffy would have, figured out what he needs to increase his armament haki, which would have been the advanced Rio or the Conquerors. Like, full stop. Because it's the problem is, it's one or the other. You know what I mean? It's either a form of advanced armament or a form of advanced Conquerors. You know what I mean? It's just that it happens to align with the advanced Conquerors in terms of its physical representation and the effect it did to Luffy. You know?
That's what I disagree with, though. I don't think his advanced armament was shown enough to be that big of a difference in the fight. Like, I don't think he used enough to be like, yeah, I could fuck you up even if you did close the gap.
First time,
I think it was pretty clear that like once Luffy learned Future Sight, they were pretty well on even.
First time
they were trading closed.
First time Katakuri used it, Luffy left the fight. Luffy ran immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Luffy went in Gear 4, got a few hits in on Katakuri. Katakuri
What I'm
whips this
saying
out.
is,
one hit him in the gut, and then Luffy's like, I gotta fucking dip. Grab Brule and run. You know what I mean?
What I'm saying is, Luffy was like majorly messed up, and then he got Future Sight, and then they kept fighting, and by the end of it, Luffy was probably more tired than Katakuri was, but he closed the gap. Like, he was closing the gap.
He was closing the gap, but even in that end, like in Luffy in Snake Man, there was still moments where he was like holding his hands as they were throbbing because Katakuri's armament or Conquerors was still hurting him so much more.
That's the thing, but he just didn't use it enough to make a difference, and Luffy closed the gap inevitably. And was winning the fight. Like, he was winning the fight. It's just that he didn't have enough left in him to actually see it through to the end.
Well, I wouldn't say that he was winning the fight, right? Because it's like, realistically, Katakuri won the fight. Katakuri knocked out Luffy, and Katakuri was up.
Yeah, but that's because Luffy was already like super messed up, right? That's what I mean.
But Luffy being,
he just didn't have enough in him left.
But Luffy being already messed up was from Katakuri, and Katakuri even the playing field like stabbing himself.
I mean, winning the fight as in if you took the fight after Luffy learned Future Sight, if you just like pause there and then play with a new mindset, right? You would be like, damn, Luffy is winning the fight. It's just that he's already like he came into the fight
So
for help.
yeah, so
essentially.
the way I see that, right, is if you took a freeze frame of Luffy and Katakuri, like in those moments, right, when Luffy learned Future Sight, right, on the stat sheet, Katakuri's still better. Katakuri still wins Luffy on the scorecard, right?
I think
But
so.
we
I
know
think
Luffy.
was,
But we know Luffy, even if he's missing something, he'll get it in that fight, that next fight. You know what I mean? It's
I
just
just
part
don't
of him.
think that he was better on the scorecard.
See, I don't know how you could say that when his punches were hurting more, his Future Sight lasted longer, his durability was lasting longer, and he was
Luffy was
landing
doing more
hits.
damage to Katakuri than Katakuri was doing to him at the time. So Luffy learned Future Sight. Luffy started doing more damage to Katakuri than he took. It's just that he was already more damaged.
No. They were going even.
I think they were going even. I think
whip out
or at
the
least
pages. They
compared
would.
to max health.
They literally, when Luffy got Future Sight, it went from Katakuri hitting 9 hits on Luffy to Luffy hitting 1 hit on Katakuri to about 50-50. That was the difference.
I don't know if it was 50-50. I think I saw Luffy doing a lot more than Cat. Like, he was definitely still getting pushed. Like, Cat was definitely still dodging shit. Like, he wasn't dominating. But he was like...
8?
He would have won. They took a senzu bean, is what I'm saying.
Hang on. I'll fucking pull this up right now. I love this fight.
With no... Okay, my take is, with no Rio gain, assuming Luffy is incapable of learning Rio, if they took a senzu bean at the end of that fight, Luffy wins the next fight they do.
Yes, but the thing is, if you took the freeze frame, Luffy's still less than. The problem is, whenever we have a fight with Luffy, we always take into consideration his growth in that fight.
That's what I'm saying is you're only saying that he'd win because he'd grow during the fight. I'm saying he'd win even if he didn't.
I'm saying he would cleanly not, because he still has weaker armament, slightly weaker observation, although it not being a huge amount. He's got less durability, less likely to land hits. At that point in time, he still has the inferior fruit in terms of landing hits.
But he doesn't have weaker armament. He just has not Rio, which Katakuri didn't use very often and wasn't really that major of a difference.
Okay, do you see? Well, it wasn't Rio because they were making contact.
So advanced whatever the heck he was using. Yeah,
so it's either Conquerors or it's like a level 2 armament, whatever the fuck that means.
Well, wasn't the original Rio like going into you, so you do touch?
No. All forms of Rio doesn't let you physically touch.
When they first explained Rio, they did not explain it very well.
So the first level of Rio creates an invisible barrier, which is what Rayleigh did to the elephant, Sentomaru did to Luffy, and Boa's sister did to Luffy. Right? It's like a spherical shockwave that stops you physically touching them, and there's a barrier between you and the person ejecting the haki. Right? The level 2 beyond that is you take that haki barrier, and while you're using that barrier, you also inject the haki in someone and it blows them up from the inside the fuck out.
Right.
So no matter what, when you're using that advanced form of haki, there's no touching. One person will always not be touching. And that's why Luffy was able to clash with Kaido when Kaido was using advanced conquerors at the beginning of the rooftop battle when Luffy didn't have advanced conquerors, because he was still using the Rio to not get touched by Kaido.
Yeah.
By the way, if you feel like referencing it, it's 895. So starts off with Luffy going Snake Man, hits Katakuri twice when he first whips out Snake Man. Katakuri dodges, keeps dodging, hits Katakuri a third time. Katakuri hits him one time. Then it is literally punch for punch. They're 50-50. Each panel is them getting a hit on each other. But every time Katakuri hits Luffy while Luffy... So the way it's depicted is like Luffy hits Katakuri in the face, Katakuri hits Luffy in the face, but when they physically both punch each other's hands, Katakuri's hand is significantly overwhelming Luffy's hand, and Luffy's still screaming in pain.
I don't really want to look at it.
That's alright, because I mean, we've already talked this to death in the past, and it doesn't matter too much now, because as much as I love Katakuri, he's not going to be fucking super relevant going forward.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But...
Also, I hate to be the guy to throw the pin on the road here, guys, but We're already 88 minutes in. I don't think we've talked about any part about the Vegapunk statement or anything for this recent chapter.
We'll whip into that now. I just want to say one closing thing just while I got this other chapter 895 up, right? The very important thing actually is, remember how when Luffy was going Gear 4 and he would hit Katakuri, it would physically like push Katakuri back?
Yeah.
The difference is when Katakuri starts using his edged mochi, when Luffy hits Katakuri in Gear 4, he no longer gets sent back. He's completely tanking Gear 4 equally. So that is a huge distinction in the difference of what was happening. You know what I mean? So like if Luffy hit Katakuri in Gear 4, Katakuri would be doing those fucking getting sent flying and that. Then he whips out the edge mochi and he's just blocking them equally. So his armament haki, that edge mochi, physically over stimulate, like it hurts Luffy to hit, but it also physically matches Gear 4. Just for reference in future. Alright, let's get into the fucking Vegapunk shit, because this is...
I'm sorry, boys. It's also partly because I gosh.
No, it's good to keep us on track.
I'm just trying to keep up.
Yeah, no, it's good to keep us on track here. So first things first, a really important bit of information that I picked up on was Vegapunk immediately being like, I want to see the White Warrior. What the hell is that transformation? No one else knows about the Sun God fruit. They all think it's the Gum Gum fruit, right? The thing I fucking zeroed in on was, that's funny. You see, there's no mention of any Gum Gum fruit in the old Devil Fruit Encyclopedia, meaning Vegapunk didn't make the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia. Meaning that Devil Fruit Encyclopedia is most likely information left over from the Void Century.
Oh.
Because he immediately mentions how he looks like that god described in the ancient texts. Right?
Yeah, because no, you also have to think, Sanji was also aware of the Cyclopedia as well.
Sanji was also the son of someone from Mads. Mads would have been sharing research. We know that Mads could potentially have been studying stuff to do with the Ancient Kingdom as well, because it coincides with information that Vegapunk was interested in. So, this notorious Devil Fruit Encyclopedia, we at least know Vegapunk didn't make it. It predates Vegapunk by a long time, seemingly, as well. Since he calls it an old book. You know what I mean?
An old book. I mean, maybe
big.
it's not even a book. Maybe it was just interpreted from a bunch of poneglyphs.
I mean, the problem with if it's from a bunch of poneglyphs is, the fact that it's an encyclopedia. And one of the problems is with that as well is they're not the only ones that have had access to it. CP9 had access to the encyclopedia. Yeah. They just didn't know what the fruits were that they had because they weren't recorded in the encyclopedia at the time. So that also potentially leads us to say that Kaku's fruit and Khalifa's fruit, right?
Mm-hmm.
If, like Vegapunk says, devil fruits are born from people's desires, they could have been devil fruits that came around for the first time after the Void Century.
Yeah, see, that's the whole thing, like, because he says here, like, it's based off of a human imagination, so it already makes me think that it's inorganic. But the idea that it also predates them makes me think that, I don't know if there is some sort of mystical power, but the fact that devil fruits can be consumed, and when the person dies and they come back, that's already kind of like, that's already like a spiritual level, at least to me, right? It doesn't sound like a natural, like, I mean, no, it sounds like a natural occurrence, considering like religions and like rebirth and everything like that. And the fact that some devil fruits look so whack, like, you got to think, because they always say, like, when a person dies, right, the soul of the devil fruit seeks out the closest fruit available. So, but is that in the context of like the fact that we have an encyclopedia, so the fruit's appearance is static? So does that mean that, like, if Kaku were to die, would his devil fruit always seek out a banana?
See, Is it the closest fruit, or is it the closest fruit of a specific type?
Yeah, that's the thing that I want confirmed. Because I know we had that example of when Caesar did it with that axolotl. I hope we got to
Axolotl?
pronounce that right.
The
But Caesar
axolotl apple?
already had that devil fruit before, so he either knew to put apples there.
He's already killed that fruit previously as well.
Yeah. So Caesar should have already figured out what fruit that thing originated from, which had to be an apple. Because a lot of people say like, oh yeah, it just searches out the nearest fruit, but I'm thinking like, if we're using the Caesar example, Caesar's already had a history with it, so he knows what type of base fruit that axolotl is supposed to come from. And then you've got crazy ones like Dalton's fruit. Like, it's literally got horns on it.
See, the problem... Yeah, see, the thing is, we did see that scene where the axolotl fruit is an apple that almost just looks like scales, almost, because of the swirls and that. So it forms separately, whereas the artificial devil fruit made by Vegapunk actually has circles on it. It doesn't have swirls.
Yeah. It's like pre-swirl.
So the weird thing is there then, right? If and I don't want to be a dick and say that Vegapunk might be an unreliable source here, because he is like the foremost scientist of the world.
He's literally the big brain.
But you can't replicate a mystical thing, can you? Whereas he's physically replicated it. He's physically replicated devil fruits repeatedly now. So there is at least science to it. Right? It just may be science that he himself doesn't understand fully.
And also another big point in the context of devil fruits, the fact that we still don't know how a devil fruit can be manifested or combined with a weapon and given life. Because if these things are artificial, how on earth does a weapon, an inanimate object, combine with a zoan and suddenly gain a personality of its own?
I would say that personality is the will.
Just an extension of Spandam's will.
I would say that zone is the personality that we were talking about before, that like say Lucci and Luffy need to synergize with. Right? So Funk Freed, right? The elephant fruit that old mate from CP9 had.
Yep.
It was a goofy, dopey elephant, right? If it was eaten by a sword, if a human ate that fruit, right? They would have to, if their personality was that of like some robust big dude, right? They would never like have that synergy with the fruit. Whereas if they had the same personality as the fruit that they ate, they would get that synergy. If that makes sense. So the only fruits that you can feed to an inanimate object is a zone, because it's the only fruits that already have a consciousness in it. Potentially, it's also possible to do it with a Logia, like I was theorizing before. But the problem is that I think that would happen in it is a zone's personality you can reason with.
Yeah, you can influence, you can properly, I guess, manipulate or converse with as well.
You can't argue with lightning or fire or magma. You know what I mean? You can't talk magma off a ledge. Which is what I think a big difference is. You know what I mean? Where they've got their own will, but their will is a lot more subtle because it's a force of nature. Although that also brings up the whole thing here of devil fruits are manifestations of the desire to see how different paths of evolution can play out. Now, first thing is the desire of different paths of evolution. Is that natural formed desire creating evolution, or is that I wish I could fly, let's make something scientifically to make me fly? You know what I mean?
Imagine if a person
had I agree, like, it could be... I
really need a jacket, then the jacket fruit manifested.
It could be like ancient kingdom science. If it is, though, I would say their science was like on the level of like changing fate, right? Like they were like literally like controlling destiny.
I mean, shit! Look at what they brought a fruit that can bring you back from the dead. They brought a fruit that can make you like heal from anything. They made a fruit that you can die and you divert that death to someone else.
Yeah.
Like,
And they also made like indestructible stone.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just like the poneglyphs are like the fact that they're indestructible is already like kind of insane.
The devil fruits themselves, right? Like one thing that one thing I'm really starting to question right now, right, is the whole if you eat 2 fruits you'll die, and the only exception we have so far is Blackbeard. What if the only reason Blackbeard's able to have 2 fruits is because he actually knows the science behind it from the ancient kingdom, because he himself, his hobby is an archaeologist, right?
My whole envision of it was when Blackbeard got Whitebeard's devil fruit, when he threw that big black tarp over him, I'm just imagining Blackbeard whipping out a quick pocket chemistry set.
What if anyone can eat multiple fruits, but you have to do it a very specific way? And our science, as far as we know, is we've tested it. Anytime that someone just bites into one randomly without, say, doing the proper prerequisites, bam, they blow up. If it's not propaganda as is.
Yeah, that's the issue, because like since that we're all finding this out about devil fruits, like I know we keep calling them devil fruits, but the word devil itself, I feel like it's also like a big red flag for propaganda, because the word devil itself is almost, I don't think it's, well, at least almost never associated with a good thing, right? So probably when the ancient kingdom kicked the bucket, everybody started spreading this idea that, like, I don't know, these things are bad, you're not supposed to eat them.
Can I put a
you lose your ability to swim.
Can I put a thought for the final part of the series in everyone's mind? Devil fruits are a manifestation of the desire to see different paths of evolution and how they can play out. Gee, I wish I could do X, or if only we could do Y. Fruit powers actualize such wishes. Each one showcases a different possibility for the future of humanity. These deviations are, of course, unnatural. So it makes sense that they attract the ear of Mother Nature, the sea itself. One who has eaten a fruit lives a totally alien existence born out of the limitless permutations of imagination. Right. And Vegapunk goes on to say, that's my theory at least. Whether you believe there's a god or not, one thing's for sure, we live in a wondrous world. Can I bring the possibility to everyone's mind, right, that devil fruits, as he says, are unnatural, so it's some form of genetic manipulation. Whether it's born out of the, like, you wish it to happen and it comes true, and then it modifies your body, or whether or not it's, I have this desire to do this, do we have the technology to create this, right? I want to bring the premise, and it coincides with the theory that people have had for a long time, right? Imu, the word Imu backwards is Umi, which is water, right? It'd be really interesting if Imu's desire was to rule everyone in the world, and thus became a water Logia, right? Giving them control over the seas to control the world, and the weakness developing for the devil fruits, because they want to subjugate anyone with those devil fruit abilities.
No, guys, this is like Platonia, like Dark Lord kind of levels.
Because the way they're describing it here, the way I'm seeing it, right, is it's a scientist talk, like, you know the whole saying where if you go back 100 years and show them current day technology, it's magic. That's what Vegapunk's doing right now. He's talking about magic to him is old-timey science. But the way he's talking about the old-timey science is it's evolution that comes from a desire, right? And it showcases different possibilities for our future. So all that is to me is some advanced technology being able to genetically modify people to have certain abilities, right? They talk about how these deviations are definite, like they know they're unnatural, And the fact that Vegapunk's been able to recreate them, right, means it's possible to do so, but it's obviously like there's a lot of work that goes into being able to do this. It's not something that just naturally forms. You know what I mean? The fact, though,
because
the fact though that they
it's
talk
also
about
the
it
whole
being
idea
the
that-
ear of Mother Nature, if anything was going to be Mother Nature itself, why would it be the sea and, say, not the wood Logia? Not, like, when you think of Mother Nature, you don't typically think of the sea. You typically think of, like, plants and life.
Yeah, because you also have to consider where Emu actually is too. Because I mean, he or she, actually I don't know. It's not confirmed whether he or she, right? She's
No,
just
it's ambiguous.
yeah, ambiguous. They're just as Emu, right?
Yep.
Yeah, no, because they also live in Pangea, which in history, Pangea was is basically the Earth, but all connected. So why would this person whose name derives from an ocean, like be in a place where it's always only like one combined piece of Earth?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's also very interesting how unnatural the sea is around the world, isn't it?
Yep.
I mean, you've got somewhere like Ennie's Lobby, which is a hole in the ocean that never fills.
And the fact that we've got flat earthers would love that, wouldn't they?
But like you got places like that, then you got places like Reverse Mountain where the water flows upward.
You also have crazy things like the knock-up stream.
Maybe it's far-fetched to say Im's got something to do with water, but the fact that Umi means water, it's almost like on the nose, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's too in your face to be
but
ignored.
Then it raises the plot twist of, and as we always talk about, like, what if the world government, as fucked up as they are the good guys? As they've been from the beginning of the story. It's just, they're a bit oppressive. You know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, what if people started running rampant with greed, right? Developing their own mutations for humanity. Everyone wanting to have their fantasies come true with abilities and that, creating devil fruits left, right, and center, right? And it was tearing the world apart. The world was running out of resources, like we know on the moon, right? There was just, although the world was at this futuristic, scientific, like, advanced civilization, right? That was only one specific kingdom. We know places like Shandora that even were allied with this kingdom were still fucking tribal.
Yeah.
Right?
All they had was gold.
So it's almost like, what happens if you live in a world where one country ends up getting all the technology and starts enforcing it on everyone else? And what happens if that one country has one trader that goes, hey, you ally with me and I'll backstab this ancient kingdom because they're pieces of shit. You know what I mean? And doesn't mean that everyone's a bad guy from the ancient kingdom, because you've got someone who was obviously Nika, who wanted to be a liberator of people. But the problem is, if everyone has free will, everyone has the free will to rob other people of their free will.
Yeah, it's a famous saying, or at least I think it's famous. Something similar to it, like, freedom must be tempered by, I think it's like, freedom must be tempered by rules or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
So,
I'm sorry, I just finished like writing like 30 pages. My inner philosopher is kind of dead.
That's all good. Also, there's another thing I really want to point out while I've got it up on the screen. Two things, really. Number one, the Seraphim that we see with Sentamaru, right?
Yep.
All have those wristbands that I was saying the other chapter look like water.
Yeah, I know. So maybe it's not water.
Or maybe all the Seraphim have got a little bit of DNA from all the other Seraphim. So they all have the same abilities, like we see with the Pacifistas, where they all have the lasers, the super hard bodies and stuff like that. What if, although they're based on each individual warlord, they've got a little bit of the attributes from each warlord combined in? So say the Jinbei warlord, the Jinbei Seraphim, right? If it is in a situation where it can only fight someone that uses a sword, it can pick up a sword and have the same skill as the Mihawk one. And vice versa with the others. They've got that there so they can use Fisherman Karate if they need to.
I don't know though, because like as far as we know, Boa Hancock is just she's just an average human who's just happens to be like just a physical boss, you know, of Conqueror's Hockey.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Would Boa Hancock be the one to add like Conqueror's Hockey to the Seraph?
Or she doesn't need Conqueror's Haki because they've replicated her Mero fruit. She can turn anyone to
Is
stone.
Boa genetically the leader?
The leader?
Is it through genetics, or is it just who's strongest?
Well, they haven't specified a leader with the Seraphim.
No, sorry, I mean actual Boa of her island.
Oh no, it's out of pure strength.
It's like,
Yeah, no.
There's no genetic.
she's not a relative of the previous emperor.
No.
No.
Their
It's
entire
all about
civilization
power.
is only might makes right.
Yeah,
I thought so.
yeah,
And
they
then-
follow
well,
the
actually, it's beauty, but beauty is might. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. The Amazons follow the typical trope of like Amazon history, where it's like, you know, they're all warriors, so it's always strength above all.
Yeah.
Another thing that I actually would question here is the only one of the only Seraphims we've seen use abilities is the Jinbei one and the Kuma one, right? Like I was saying before, what about the possibility if these Seraphim have multiple devil fruits that they can use? Because
That's just straight up broken.
they're a genetically manipulated being in the first place. Because
Yo, when these Seraphim grow up, I gotta say, like, I might even put them at Admiral level at this point.
oh, dude, if they
were at the actual case,
if these things hit adulthood, they are. If they learn Haki, I should say. Without Haki, their first commander easy now, and they will continue to stay in that realm. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
It's just like without Haki, it's hard to take that next step.
That's fair, yeah.
But that being said, a good way to close that gap is, like I said, what if the Seraphim have got multiple Devil Fruit abilities each? Like the same basic stat. Because a big thing about the Seraphim to think about is the Pacifistas. The whole thing about the Pacifistas pre-time skip is you are creating multiple of one thing that has multiple sets of abilities.
Oh my gosh. So I mean, if there is, I'm guessing there is, the Gecko Moria one must be absolutely insane.
Well,
like in terms of an open battlefield, if you want to clear a place out and you send the Gecko Moria Seraphim,
oh god, could you imagine that? It dives under the ground with the Tsum Tsum fruit and then reaches out and grabs your shadow.
bro.
That actually would be so busted. But
That's like horror film levels of like
but
cunning right there.
but that's the thing. Like, these are the questions we've genuinely got to ask here, because at this point in time, Vegapunk's been able to recreate people. He's been able to feed inanimate objects devil fruits. He's been able to not only recreate people, but make them like stronger with cybernetic enhancements. He's been able to completely modify their DNA so that they can splice the different DNAs from different species to give you specific traits from those specific species, right? If he's been able to recreate a devil fruit based on DNA, what's to stop him being able to include a devil fruit into these things, like we've already seen, or multiple? Unless the DNA of one fruit directly contradicts another. All it is just super high tier lineage factor manipulation at this point. And it's like, all it is if you've already got the fruit, you know the specific code you need to manipulate that part of the lineage factor, realistically. Because like a big thing up until now was there's no multiple of any one fruit. There's only one of each fruit that naturally occurs, as far as we were aware, right? But I mean, we've literally the last chapter seen 2 pawpaw fruits, and we think pretty confidently that there are 2 Tsum Tsum fruit users at the moment. So what is to stop them sharing this between all of them? Because the whole point of these Seraphim is like they're an all-encompassing battle unit. You know what I mean?
Gosh, no. I mean, I love this thing actually because it breaks the common One Piece mold so much.
I love how Otis saved it and how he implemented it, because the thing is, it was already visually scary, the fact that they had King's abilities, and we just came across like, oh my god, we know how strong King is. But like the fact that he's able to flood the market with so many people this strong means other people are actually going to be able to get close to this strength. So it's like you don't bottleneck the power level. Everyone gets to like instead of bottlenecking, you get to raise the bar on what the power scaling is, and everyone can move up equally. If that makes sense. And I mean, like shit. At
I
this,
just think like I think like the awesome thing with the Seraphim is that like Luffy right now is gonna have a really hard fight in this arc. Like pre-Seraphim plus Lucci, obviously he's gonna get help, and like we don't really know what's gonna happen. But like right now, there is potential for him to have an insanely high diff fight, potentially stronger than he currently is, right? Like, and force him to grow even more. And then next we've got potentially Blackbeard, and then we have Imp. Like, still have enough tough engagements in the story to keep the story really interesting forever. So I remember at the end of Wano, everyone was thinking like, well, I mean, what is there left? Like Blackbeard and Im, that's kind of it, right? Like 3 other chapters probably just going to be like a Zoe where there's not really much of a challenge. Just
and a kind
this,
of question mark.
yeah, I guess, yeah, true actually. But like the difference between that and this is that like now it's like okay, now he has enough to really like tide us through to the end of the series. With this hard fight, and then maybe he goes to Elbaf, and there's someone really strong waiting on Elbaf, and then he's got the fight against Blackbeard, and then he's got the fight against Im. That's enough for him, to be honest.
Oh,
that's awesome. Yeah, he can get all the way to the end of the series off of the current opponents that are left in the series, which is really cool.
Actually, while we're talking about opponents and stuff, there's 3 little things that I want to talk about quickly in the later half of this chapter, right? I'll go in chronological order, actually. So when we see when Sentomaru tells S-Bear to attack Cypherpole,
yes,
I don't necessarily understand this panel wholeheartedly. There's 2 Pacifista explosions either side of them, and it looks like the S-Bear tried to use the Paw ability to teleport Cypherpole away. Is that what was happening there, and they've just dodged him? So those 2 Pacifista explosions are from Sentomaru's side, where the other Pacifistas have shot them, and he's just tried to do the bubble pop? Or has he come and swung in and done, without like a laser on his hand, created those explosions of light?
Oh, that panel with Kuma with the Seraphim Kuma shooting.
Yeah, so it's like the you got Kaku flying away on the left, you got the 2 explosions either side, and like the pacifist is slapped. He's coming with a hands up.
I was a bit wigged out by that too. What I landed on was that he basically did like a rapid fire multiple shots as he dragged his arm across, and that lava shot on the left side of the panel is where his hand's pointing right now. So he shot to the left, and to his left, and to his right.
Let me ask you this then: where did he shoot it from? Because there's no cannon on his hand.
Yeah, right. That's fair.
Is that something the editing team just missed?
I mean, it's possible, but like the way I interpreted that is the pacifistas that were with so like say the Jinbei and Boa ones, right? Shot. So like they shoot because Sentomaru's like saying to engage. So they shoot either side of the Kuma pacifista, and the Kuma pacifista one tries to completely win the fight by using his devil fruit to teleport all of the CP away, as per the request of Sentomaru to get rid of them. And it's like Kaku just jumped forward and Stussy jumped down. And like there's another really odd thing that we've never seen, right? That I kind of want to point out is This Kuma got all of these people here. Lucci, Stussy, Kaku, and those other fodder here with his Paw ability. Right?
Yeah.
So did he do like 30 trips back and forth teleporting people from the ship? Or can he do a big group teleportation as well? You know what I mean? Does he have to send people individually, or can he do group stuff? Is that another function of the Devil Fruit ability that we just haven't seen? Something to just keep at the back of the mind, but it's just like I found that sequence there a little hard to follow 100%, and I wasn't sure if you guys may have like.
I found it hard
analyze
as
it
well. Like what I said was just kind of what I made up.
Yeah.
Didn't like definitely immediately go, oh, that's definitely what happened. Yeah, I kind of just went, what's going on here? And I was like, oh, okay, maybe he's doing that.
Because that star symbol in the middle looks like that's already like it almost looks like what's shot a laser, and you can see like the light trailing off it where it's moved, but that also could be like him trying to have swiped his hand but missing. If that makes sense.
It could be like they just decided to put the star in between where his hand, where he shot first and second.
Or
but like, I don't know.
Or it's like he's tried to use his paw ability on Stussy. Stussy's job dodged, and it's halfway between Stussy and her, and you can see the backswing coming from behind Stussy. So he's like swiped over her as she's ducked down.
Okay, I see that.
Yeah, I get you.
Next thing is the hierarchy of the Pacifista command, right? One thing that I find really interesting is 5 elders on top, then Vegapunk, then Sentomaru, then anyone that's got a chip, right? The thing about that is, obviously, like, the elders want Vegapunk to give control to them, right? So the elders can override Vegapunk in that regard. But what if Vegapunk's failsafe is including Dragon somewhere on that list, maybe above the elders?
Oh, that'd be cool.
Because that Order 66 mindset has been in the hearts for people for years. The fact that Dragon and Vegapunk have got a connection. Vegapunk couldn't do it himself because it would clearly give him away. You know what I mean?
It's kind of crazy too, because like I'm just looking at the design for the authority chip. Like it looks kind of funky, don't you guys think? It looks like a Christmas ornament stuck in an ice cube.
It looks like a like a ball bearing bomb in a glass casing.
I know. Like
it definitely looks odd.
Like I mean, if you were to look at that, would you assume it's like an authority chip? Like if Vegapunk just put that down in front of you and you were like, would authority chip be one of the first things to come to mind?
Mind you, is that even what the authority chip looks like, or is that just like a Stussy making some shit up? You know what I mean? Because it is like when you say a chip, I feel like one person would be carrying a chip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a computer chip. Anyway, the last thing is Rob Lucci's handgun. The lock.
Yeah.
This was fucking cool. But at the same point in time, I've got to ask, is Sentomaru out now completely? Because Sentomaru's whole thing pre-timeskip was him talking shit about how he's got, like, the perfect guard. He's the most defensive man in the world. And he has advanced armament haki. Like, I want this man to get up and do something, but at the same point in time, like, he may do it against someone else, but it's like, dude, that attack looks like it just goes straight through his collarbone. You know what I mean? It's like...
Yeah, but, I mean, this is also the world of One Piece, where you can get a magma fist through the chest and you can still talk perfectly fine.
Oh, believe me, I completely get that. I mean, I'm always
it's
still...
like that funny. It's like that funny conversation we had on whether or not people in One Piece have life insurance.
Oh, the answer is I can't pay enough. Have you seen Trigun?
No, I have not.
Oh, well, if you ever watch Trigun, right, I need a whole spin-off series of those poor insurance girls, but like the One Piece version going around, going up to people being like, I'm sorry, our insurance doesn't cover acts of Yonko or Navy, so you're not covered. Too bad. We kept your money. Fuck you.
These insurance agents that basically just follow around the main character and tell every city that he goes through, sorry, you're not covered for this person. If this person does damage to your city, we don't cover it.
Damn.
It is freaking hilarious. I forgot you've watched Trigun, dude. I love that series. That was funny. The Badland Rumbles were great. That was a great movie.
Yeah, it was a good series. Got a bit weird at the end, like every anime does. But...
I barely remember I remember the end, but I choose to forget the end.
Yeah.
But this chapter obviously ends with Rob Lucci clean, completely fine, ready to keep fighting. That handgun technique, I fucking love it. It looks so good. Just the idea that he's got like his hands like a lightsaber, and if he catches you off guard, he can just run his arm through you. Is so sick. You know what I mean? And like the black clad, like it looks more than just black clad haki, almost, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I obviously think it is just regular armament haki, but it's just like the way it's depicted. It's just like it looks so fucking cool. Like this is the rule of cool, is it not? I also love that he's.
No, this is how you reintroduce a character. Honestly,
I also love that his beard has got the awakening flame on it. He reminds me so much of Aku from Samurai Jack in this.
oh gosh, Aku.
Doesn't he?
That was an awesome series.
Actually, hang on a second. Yo, dude, Aku is just an awakened zone. Just looking up Aku right now, dude, he's got the awakened zone fire and all that sort of stuff. That I'm calling it now. One Piece is gonna end and it's gonna be a prequel for Samurai Jack. Aku is gonna be the awakened form of Blackbeard. My memes will never end. All right, Aku is just Blackbeard. Look at him. Oh god, that was such a good series. That was actually such a good series. I miss Samurai Jack. I love that show. But yeah, there's also one more thing I almost forgot. Sentomaru orders S Snake to lead the Straw Hats to the vacuum rocket and see them safely through the Frontier Dome, right?
Mm-hmm.
One thing I really have to preface with this is Boa starts looking at the Straw Hats, like the Boa Seraphim starts looking at the Straw Hats and you've got a ... Is the Boa Seraphim going to be in love with Luffy?
Oh god.
And is it going to be
happen, Oda, please?
And is it going to be unable to, even if it's given orders, attack Luffy?
Because also when Santomaru gives the order, if you look at the facial expressions as well on the Seraphim, the Boa one looks like the only one who seems to be like genuinely calm. Like the Mihawk one and the Jinbei one look very like just angry. But the Boa one's like a lot more mellow.
I feel like that's also because like she's not getting an attack order; they're getting an attack order to suppress CP0. So that's like battle face, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, whoops! I completely missed that expression bubble.
Also, though, big thing to note is there's a vacuum rocket in the Frontier Dome. I also noticed at the beginning of this chapter as well that we finally see the island from the outside perspective, right? Completely without fog around it. And the whole, like, egghead part, like the egg part, is all... So, you know how we knew it was on an island cloud, right?
Mm-hmm.
We see that it's completely not connected to the island.
Yeah, it's just above it.
It's a floating island above the island. Meaning, at any point in time, we could drive off CP0 from this island and move the entire island. No different to the weather island of Witheria that Nami went to.
Or like Big News Morgan's kettle area.
Yeah, and we know that Nami knows how to pilot Cloud Islands because that's part of what she did.
Be a cool thing.
So, like, arguably, this island could run away. Like, this whole island we could just pick up and run away.
Oh gosh, driving island through the air traffic.
I didn't mention it before, but there's also one other thing that has me fucking terrified right now. Fucking terrified. Do you want to know what that is?
We got a break next week.
Yes, but so Kizaru's on the way, right?
Yes.
So one of three things is going to happen, right?
Who's Kuma? We've got Kizaru, Sentamaru, and Kuma. Last time this happened was
Sabati, which
Lobby. Yeah, Sabati.
which guess what? Guess what, Daniel? Guess what?
Happened.
Annie's lobby was Whole Cake Island, right? So you had Water 7 and Zoe. A straw hat gets taken, and the crew goes to save them. Annie's lobby and Whole Cake Island. You have Luffy come in, fight against one of the really strong but not quite the strongest members of the crew in Bluno and Cracker. Then after that, he goes through and he fights the top, like, not the leader of the organization, but the top strongest officer in Rob LUCCI and Katakuri, and has the hardest fight of his fucking life, right? Only for the overwhelming force that no one can beat on the island looming in the background in the form of the Buster Call and Big Mum rampaging, right? We then leave, we go to Thriller Bark and Wano, right? At both of these places, we've got it set up specifically for the Big Mum Pirate storyline, the Wano Samurai storyline, yokai, there's ancient giants, and the entire arc is about defeating 2 warlords and 2 Yonko, right? Then we leave Thriller Bark, and we get to Sabati. At Sabati, the crew come across the new pacifistas, Sentamaru, and Kizaru, and the crew is defeated.
Oh god.
Do we have the final inverse of this? And we have the pacifistas, Sentamaru, and Kizaru, but the Straw Hats beat them to show how far they've come since the time skip.
I sure hope they don't lose.
So, like, as sad as I would be, and you know I'd be fucking sad about it, Kizaru rocks up, this turns into an all-out, like a mini all-out war, and the Straw Hats fucking wipe. Whether it's just Kizaru or everyone. Because that would show a pure inverse of, we weren't strong enough to beat you then, but now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's set up and it's mirrored the exact same way. Alternatively, one thing has me fucking terrified. And do you know what that is, guys?
Straw Hats get swamped.
Kizaru. So there's 3 options, right? Option 1, Kizaru comes, Kizaru gets beaten, Straw Hats, la-di-da-di-da, run away. Typically would be what happens, right? Option 2, Kizaru comes, Straw Hats get overwhelmed, we run with our tail between our legs, meaning nothing has really changed. Even though everything's changed, nothing's really changed since Sabati. It's a somber note. You know what I mean? Also, the whole point of Sabati was Luffy, although Luffy got beaten, Luffy and the Straw Hats never lost pre-time skip. You know what I mean? That's kind of happened post-time skip too, hasn't it? We've been beaten.
In a way, yeah. Until Kaido appeared.
We've been beaten. I mean, Kaido's beaten Luffy no different as how Crocodile or Lucci beat Luffy. But we've never had an arc where we didn't get our goal.
True.
So, there's a potential for that to happen. And then there's option 3, which is the option that has me fucking mortified more than anything. Right? What? So, Kizaru's on his way with whatever force he's bringing. There are 3 major things to keep worried about. Number one is Kizaru's natural weakness. What would Kizaru's natural weakness be?
Darkness? Gravity?
Darkness, yes. Who has the dark fruit and the darkness abilities, right? Who's within one island of Egghead right now?
Blackhead beards.
And although he's fighting Law, if, say, he's defeated Law, one thing to bring up is there's another potential weakness for Kizaru's fruit, which would be shadows. The last time we saw the shadow fruit, it was technically in the possession of the Blackbeard pirates. Whether or not Moria is alive or dead, we do not know, but we haven't seen that fruit reappear nor Moria since that event. Right? We could have a really fucked up potential moment here where obviously they're setting Blackbeard up to be the final villain. Well, not the final villain, but like they're setting Blackbeard up for center stage, yeah? How would this be for a checkmate if Blackbeard beat Law, kills Law, but his fruit reappears and Blackbeard has the fruit but hasn't eaten it, right? What would happen if a zombie ate a devil fruit?
Oh. I don't know, man.
Could Blackbeard, with the shadow fruit, resurrect someone? Say Law, feed Law back the same op fruit, and make the zombie Law give him the immortality surgery.
Oh my god.
Then imagine
this is the ultimate loophole right now. If this interaction would actually work.
Then imagine an immortal Blackbeard with the Quake fruit and the Dark fruit, backed up by his jacked up crew, including someone who's now got the shadow abilities, jumping Kizaru. Anyone that falls victim to Blackbeard potentially at this point in the story, essentially he's the Night King. Right? Think about that. With the with the Shadow's ability, anyone that he beats, he can resurrect on his side.
Oh, nuts.
He potentially now has a fucking monopoly in the final war with that.
Although, quick subversion though. Do you guys honestly think that Gecko Moore is actually, like, I know he's being forced to work with Blackbeard now, but do you guys actually think that he's being compliant? Like, he'll actually do what quote-unquote Blackbeard has planned?
I think he's dead. If he didn't show up in Wano, meaning I think he's dead, which is hard because we also know that Perona was going to try and help him.
Yeah, I know that whole issue too. So I mean, like, Perona's still kind of just floating around in there as well.
And we know Bonnie made it from Merijoa to Egghead, right? Perona was only like a little bit more into the Grand Line than that. So arguably she could be in the same area of sea as us now, or Blackbeard now. You know what I mean? I would hate it if Perona has been killed and her fruit's been taken by the Blackbeard pirates. That would really get to me, right? But
Oda can't go that far, please now.
I think the best person to have the fruit would be Alvaro Pizarro, the Corrupt King, to have the Shadow Fruit.
Yeah, because it hasn't been shown that he has an ability yet.
It hasn't been shown, and what better to be a corrupt king than a zombie army?
No, this makes too much sense.
Right? And I'm really scared because it's at the point in time in the story where the dominoes, for lack of a better term, right? We've set up a game of dominoes, right? Like, you've set them all up, you've done whatever fancy pattern you want, and there's a really big gust of wind raging around. None of the dominoes have fallen, but everyone's looking in bated breath for that first domino that falls over. You know what I mean? And that's the problem here, where it's like, I think this is going to snowball so fast. So the fact that the Straw Hats are starting to fight here, if Blackbeard's already beaten Law, right? what would he do if he could third party another war? You know what I mean? And it's like it's so hard. It's so hard because there's so many pieces on the board. Like one of the things that I'm really like just like, dude, where are you? Is like, where's Weevil? How does Weevil fit into these equations? You know, I have to keep reminding people like Weevil exists. He's gonna show up somewhere and somehow, right? But the problem is at the moment, all these things are happening next to each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I love, because even if we're focused on the Straw Hat Pirates, there's always another faction on the move.
And it sucks because you know I love me boy Kizaru, but I struggle right now in whatever direction we take the story in. I think Kizaru is on borrowed time for 2023.
Yeah. No, Oda's definitely going to. He's gonna have to give the admirals like. I just want Oda to give the admirals a huge feat before the fall. That's all I want, because the admirals have been hyped for years now, but we haven't seen them at full power.
How
I want to see what the admirals are capable of when they're in like a 10-day fighting attitude.
hear me out here because this will fucking gut me, and it will gut me so hard. How would you feel if Kizaru 1v10s the Blackbeard Pirates? Right?
Okay.
Like he did the Supernova at Sabbaty. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Fucks up practically the whole crew. Gets defeated or semi-captured by Blackbeard in the darkness. And the fight ends. Like, and again, we've got no idea what's happened to Law potentially at this point, right? We just know that Blackbeard's shown up somewhere else, right? And the last thing we see is Blackbeard calling over Aokiji to finish off Kizaru.
Oh, that'd be rough, but it'd be awesome.
Like I'd be doing backflips, but at the same point in time, I'd be like, dude, what the fuck? Because, and you know, I don't want to hype up the story to the point where it's not gonna reach those heights. You know what I mean? I don't want to gas the story up. I've been burnt in the past with expectations and that, but I'm just sitting here really nervously going, well, what's been set up? We've been told this chapter that Kizaru's coming. We know that Kuma's coming, right? We know that Blackbeard's around the corner having another fight, but we also know that Weevil hasn't shown up yet. We haven't seen half of the Blackbeard Pirates crew show up, right? Like, Blackbeard fighting Law's crew and that. We didn't see fucking Shiryu. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we didn't see Shiryu. We didn't see
Shiryu, Katarina Devon, Alvaro Pizarro,
Didn't think he
Lafitte.
was invisible. Haha.
But like,
Oh,
there was a huge group of people we didn't see. You know what I mean? So there's so many things that are potentially about to happen here. You know? And it sucks so much worse that we're on break next week. Do any of you guys have any theories or thoughts on what's going to happen next chapter?
I don't know. I'm so lost. My assumption is the Seraphim turn on Luffy. Luffy now has to suddenly fight 3 Seraphim and Lucci at the same time. He gets absolutely starting to get wrecked, and then someone on his side steps in to try to help him, and maybe we cut away, and that's kind of it for his perspective, and then maybe we cut away to something else.
Do you know what? I love that. Piggybacking off that, Jinbei fights Seraphim Jinbei, so we can see how strong the Seraphim are compared to the original.
Good.
That'd be a good, like just a blanket power scaling move. You know what I mean?
yeah.
At the same point in time, I think that Vegapunk realizes what's happened, and Vegapunk is going to have to make a call whether or not he tries to go back down into this area to tell the Seraphim to disobey the CP orders or not. Because if real Vegapunk gives them orders, they'll turn on CP and rob Lucci here for good, unless the Gorosei somehow show up. But at the same point in time, if he goes down, he's potentially going to be killed by Rob Lucci. No different to what Rob Lucci sort of did to Sentomaru. You know what I mean? And it could almost turn into a game of cat and mouse, or almost like Tom and Jerry, right? Where you've got Luffy trying to mallet whack Rob Lucci, while Lucci's trying to play whack-a-mole with an invisible Vegapunk. I know that might sound like weird, but at this point in time, it's like we're in the Looney Tunes section. You know what I mean? It's more believable now than it would have been like 2 years ago saying that.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, honestly, my guess would be like, I just want to see maybe what would happen if like, because you have Jinbei versus his own Seraphim, and then you have the S-Hawk go up against Zoro. I don't know how, but it does happen. Like maybe the S-Hawk sends a slash that Zoro recognizes. Then Zoro's like, I gotta get on that island. And then you've got like just this like this Boa Hancock one that just looks at Luffy, and I don't know, just like a cute sense of camaraderie. And then the Boa one turns on everybody else.
The thing that's like really interesting me is the idea that like Zoro is still on the ship. Originally, I was like, yeah, that's fair. He probably just doesn't need to be used this arc. But now it's like, okay, well, some crazy stuff going on. Probably could be used this arc.
Well,
yeah,
like
I know.
If we're fighting 3 Seraphim,
well,
you kind of need him.
I actually think Zoro's already showcased that he's above a Seraphim by beating King. What if Kizaru shows up and he's got to hold off Kizaru for a little bit on his own?
Be cool.
Because remember the last time him and Kizaru met, Zoro was severely injured and unable to fight.
Which he's supposed to be severely injured now.
Well, actually, he healed back up. The Minx gave him the old rub and tug and the happy ending. Got him on his feet with a smile on his face. You know what I mean? But like, if Lucci's here, Yonko-ish level fighting Luffy, and Luffy's into that, you know what I mean? An admiral is either relative to or less than, depending on who you freaking talk to. You know what I mean? So
it's always up in the air. The constant Yonko and Admiral debate.
Imagine if Kizaru shows up, starts fighting Zoro. Zoro gets some good hits in. Maybe Kizaru beats him. Who knows? You know what I mean? But it could be like a really interesting thing where like everything's encroaching on the Straw Hats again. No different to Savity. And more people have got to start making moves. And then you've got Jinbei with Fishman Karate, Sanji with Diablo and Ifrit Jinbei, and Frankie with his
Could burst.
Well, I was going to say with his lasers, having to fight against the Seraphim since Zoro and Luffy are dealing with tougher opponents.
Yeah.
Because
fair.
I mean, we know that they're not laser tested yet, so Frankie could potentially harm them. And Frankie has a Yonko level or Admiral level attack. Sanji's Ifrit Jinbei and Diablo Jinbei have been shown to be able to burn things from the inside out. Right? So it's a type of Duraneg in a way. Zoro's freaking Zoro. So Zoro may come down and fight too. Like, could you imagine Zoro fighting the Seraphim Mihawk?
I want to see that so bad.
Jinbei versus Jinbei, Zoro versus Seraphim Mihawk. Sanji tries to fight the Kuma one if they take over the Kuma one, right? And it makes it really hard because he can't fight the Boa one, but if Bonnie wakes up, Bonnie will try to stop him fighting the Kuma one. So you get that typical Sanji gets nerfed in the arc by not being able to fight fully.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that's just saying that the other fucking Seraphim don't show up if they're on the island.
I just want this redemption so bad because Gecko Moria has always been like pooped on by the fan base, and if we end up watching out that he's got the most strongest Seraphim, because the potential of the Shadow Fruit is insane.
Oh, definitely. And like we said, like if the Seraphim have all got the same abilities as well, could you imagine if one of these Seraphim starts using like Dofi's fruit? or something like that. You know what I mean?
Use the strings to cut the shadow. What happens if the Gecko Moria Seraphim takes on the shadows of its fellow Seraphim?
It might just get a multiplier boost. Like how Moria did when he ate 1,000 shadows. Just makes him physically stronger, as if it was both of them combined. Sort of like Wapple.
Yeah, that would just break it.
I mean, shit. Like, if the so like, you know how the Seraphim are all shared in a network, or seemingly based on like trend communications and stuff like that. If I am right, and like if they do have like the devil fruit manipulated DNA, so they've all got the same fruits, or even imagine if they don't all have the fruit, but they all have the ability to interact with fruits, the same fruits, if that makes sense. So like each one of the Seraphim may have their own specific fruit based on their Seraphim owner that they lean towards. So like Mihawk's one leans towards sword fighting, Boa's leans towards the Mero, Jinbei's leans towards Fishman Karate with the use of the Tsum Tsum fruit. But like maybe all of them have all the abilities, they just have their like biological default. You know what I mean? So if that's the case, what would happen if, say, a Moria one picked up someone's shadow and Mihawk's Seraphim cut it? Cut the shadow. You know what I mean? We get into some wonky, questionable territory here.
It's always questionable.
I'm so pissed off that there's a break next week. I'm excited. Like, this is such a good chapter to have a cliffhanger, but such a scumbaggy thing to do. You know what I mean?
Typical orders.
That being said, we've been going for 2.5 hours. Is there anything you guys want to bring up?
Not really. I feel like we've covered quite a decent amount.
One thing I will make sure to notice, because I brought it up the first time, the island's still at 72%. So that number hasn't changed. I will say one thing though. This one Marine that's talking to Akainu, I feel so sorry for him.
I wanted to actually ask you guys. Do you guys know who this guy is?
No, he's not a named Marine so far, but this is the ugliest bastard in One Piece. I feel so sorry for him. He's got 2/3 of his body's torso. His freaking forearms come down to his waist, and his hand at relax would be around his ankles, and he's all hunched neck. I feel so sorry for this man. I genuinely feel so sorry for the anatomy of this man. His tailor must hate him. But there is a cool looking person next to him with like long white features.
Yeah.
So that dude seems interesting or cool.
It is a dude, right? The long hair's not.
I want to say, until proven otherwise, it's a dude.
Yeah.
But I like how we're getting more Marines introduced again. Really showing like the Marines have a huge scale, and like although there are a heap of Marines that we've seen up until now, it's like they almost have endless numbers at endless levels.
Yeah.
So,
which is what you need in the military.
Yeah, but it also makes it good now because it's like, I mean, for Lazy Man's perspective, right? If you can just whip out a bunch of new Marines at different ranks, and like people can understand, like, oh, they must be this strong because they're this rank, right? It makes it interesting now going forward for just like other people to have fights, stuff like that as well. Which Oda seems to just be shoving a shit ton of like random fun clashes in as we're just shooting through the story, snowballing more and more and more. You know. Also, next chapter is officially the last chapter of 2022. So going out with a big cliffhanger, I reckon. Next chapter probably also, or it's probably tomorrow actually, that we get Jump Fest for 2023. So I dare say we're gonna get the annual cryptic Oda message coming out soon. You know, like what? let me go. Law will I can't really talk about that. Blackbeard will sorry about that. Akainu might okay. Hope you enjoy watching One Piece this year. You know what I mean?
I know.
Last year's one was bullshit. He was like, "Oh, I hope I can draw it well. Luffy will just keep an eye on Luffy this year." And I mean, we got 2 Gear 5 fights this year. Think about that.
Pretty.
Like, I mean, when Gear 4 first came out, it was a while before we saw Gear 4 again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, even then when we first saw Gear 4, it took quite a bit until we even saw like a different variation of it. Like how long from Gear 4 normal to Gear 4 Snake Man?
A year? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Gear 4 normal to Gear 4 Snake Man was 3 years. 4 years.
Yeah, 3 years. Like Gear 4 normal to Gear 4 Tank Man, Gear 4 Snake Man. Like they were quite far apart.
It was around 780 that Gear 4 came out. Around 840 that Tank Man and Gear 4 came back for then, and then it was 890 or 895 or whatever, 890s that Snake Man came out. So it's like it takes a while to get an arc to a point where we can fight. So I'm really loving the fact that Oda's jumping into this so quickly and we're getting to see these cool abilities, because one of the things I was actually really worried about is like how little we would see Gear 5 before the end of One Piece. If that makes sense.
Don't you mean Gear 6?
Hey man, Gear 6 may be coming, who knows?
I like the theme of like 7 always being a lucky number.
I mean, if you're holding out for Gear 7, I don't know if I can be on that journey with you, but I'll sure as shit just be standing by going like, well, you son of a bitch. You got it. Alright, that being said, we've been going for a damn long time. I need to go to the toilet. So, let's wrap the stream up here, alright, lads?
Yeah, good.
Any last comments that either one of you want to make?
All good.
Honestly, I don't know.
All right. Well, I'll wrap the stream up with something wonderful. All right. Being that the year's almost over, coming into the new year, it's almost time for our new top 50, lads. So time to start putting pen to paper and start coming up with your new lists.
Remember, only a live One Piece character.
Only alive. I'm officially saying Big Mum and Kaido are taken off the board this year. I will allow King and Queen because
I'm going to say we need actual rules. We need to talk about it and genuinely.
Okay.
Because it needs to be like, okay, are we including Dragon or not? Doesn't need, like, you know, we can't make it like, oh, I decided not to include him because we don't really know. It has to be, do you include him or do you not? So that we're all on the same page, so we all do the list. Because last time, my list was like, my number like 20 was your number 30.
Okay.
But after that, it was all pretty consistent, just because I included more people.
Okay.
So you guys were like, I'm not going to include him, I'm not going to include Dragon, I'm not going to include this person.
I will say, they've got to be alive. I'll only make an exception for King and Queen at the moment because we don't really know whether or not they're alive or dead. You know what I mean?
No. If they're alive and they've been on an on-screen, like, on-panel fight.
Okay, is that the rule? So we're not doing Dragon and things like that?
Well, I was going to say,
I would just say, like, to put that in, like, to avoid nuance.
At this point in time, I actually, like, I want to include Dragon in that. So I'd say the only person is people that are dead are excluded, and only Im is excluded. Right?
Is excluded.
So exclude Im because I feel like
Imu.
Yeah, Imu, sorry, because I feel like everyone would put Imu at number 1, so it doesn't have intrigue in that. You know what I mean? So exclude Imu and anyone that's dead. I will say it's hard to confirm people that are dead or alive, right? So I would say for now, just people that are confirmed dead, right? I would say at this point in time, Big Mum and Kaido were confirmed dead. As much as that hurts everyone else. But like, we don't know the fates of, say, the Topiropo. You know what I mean? We don't necessarily know the fate of Hawkins. Like, is Hawkins dead or alive? You know what I'm saying?
He's dead.
Because it's hard at this point in time to tell whether or not Oda's killing them off, or if Oda's just like, you're no longer relevant, you can show up 20 years later when we flash to the future.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
Heck, Oda brought Pound back.
I'm talking Pound. Pound went in on Linlin. He got the last laugh too. He got the kids. He took the wife, the kids, and the house. Yeah, I might work on the rules a bit. Maybe think about it a bit more.
Yeah, just checking like a quick like reference sheet. That's all I need.
Just because it's we may even split it up and do a current, say, top 30 and maybe a top 50 of all time.
Top 50.
Yeah, potentially. I'll work on this behind the scenes and I'll touch base with you in the Discord though. We'll talk about it in there. Yep.
Don't forget about top 20 One Piece girls.
Oh, I could never forget the top 20 One Piece girls, because guess what? Everyone's favorite Vice Admiral that no one knows anything about is skyrocketing to the top of the charts. Right? She's not number one.
Really?
She's not number one, but Dole is fucking up there for sure. She's literally a doll. Literally a doll.
I mean, she looks like a doll, but she looks like she can kick your ass.
I mean, shit. So does Big Mom. But back in her younger years, she was a MILF, wasn't she?
My God.
Oh, end the stream now before I say something I can't take back. Alright.
This is for Patreon and After Hours, folks.
Yeah, we need to start doing the bloody One Piece Dark. Although, now that I know you're up to date on My Hero, we might do some My Hero stuff as well sometime if you want. Because I was wanting to do a sit down and have a rethink about all the characters in My Hero and do a top 20 stream for My Hero at some point as well. Just because, like,
I'm a little more sparse in My Hero because I've kind of been I've been binging this thing because I saw like one episode of it on Netflix, like Kengan Ashura.
I mean, hey, I've finally cracked the shits and I've sat my wife down to start watching Bleach because I'm like, I'm sorry, I want to watch Thousand Year Blood War arc. I'm pumping out the entire series, filler and all, so she can get up to date, so we can finally watch it. Because I'm like, dude, it's already got 10 episodes out. And I'm like, how have I let this slip so long? Dude, if any of you guys are fans of Bleach, right, in any capacity, right, I guarantee you, Thousand Year Blood War arc, the anime, it's gonna be killing the internet for a minute, because that arc was so good in the manga, so good. And
what you know about anime adaptations?
Well, the manga actually was forcefully finished. Like, the author, Tite Kubo, literally got told, like, oh, you've got to finish up the entire manga in a month. So the ending was really rushed in the manga,
Yeah,
but apparently they're actually changing it for the anime, partially. So I'm keen for it. I'm keen for it. That's where I'm going down the rabbit hole.
Game of Thrones ends up when it goes off script.
Yeah. I need to. I haven't seen House of Dragons yet. I need to. The only place I can watch it is in my studio in here. So it's like I don't get to leisurely sit on the couch and watch it. You know what I mean?
I was asking my dad about it yesterday, and he said he liked Lord of the Rings better, which is a pretty bad review.
I'll have to watch and make my own opinion on that. Yeah. All right, let's wrap the stream up there. Peace, nothing but love, nothing but respect. Have a damn good day, guys. Goodbye. Say goodbye, Eggs and Kuma.
Bye, Eggs and Kuma.
Love that. Eggs and Kuma. Bye. All right, peace, nothing but love, nothing but respect. Goodbye.